Good news. Yeah, you're going to be first. Okay, yeah. Thank you all very, very much for being with us this morning. We're going to change our agenda just at least a little bit, but we are going to start off with the invocation from Rabbi Greg Harris from Congregation of Beth-El. Please rise if you are able.
Dalifnei mi ata omed, know before whom you stand. These words are often written prominently in Jewish sanctuaries for the congregation to see. And in many synagogues, Dalifnei mi ata omed is emblazoned above the ark where the Torahs are kept. And yet, forgetting who we stand before is too easy. It is with pride and humility I am before elected officials of Montgomery County who will, with sincerity and consideration, make decisions on behalf of the million residents of our county, citizens and non-citizens, children and vulnerable, wealthy and powerful residents, as well as cowering victims of violence. You will decide how to spend the money of doctors and teachers, sanitation workers and bankers who pay taxes for the benefit of the greater good. Today, Dalifnei mi ata omed, we stand before and honor Mr. Charles McGee, the oldest living member of the Tuskegee Airmen who prepared to defend our country during World War II. His service and dedication to our country is to be blessed. And Dalifnei ata mi ata omed, we appreciate the work of those dedicated to stopping, through prevention or prosecution, the abuse and harm to our youth. We stand with gratitude carrying the responsibilities of office and the burdens of leadership to uplift all within our proud county. Dalifnei mi ata omed, I ask for the strength and wisdom of faith and family to stand today dedicated, prepared, and devoted to whom I serve. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Rabbi. The next item that we're going to change our agenda just slightly. I realize that after this we say general business, but today this actually has a greater meaning for us because we're having a presentation. We're truly honored to have Brigadier General Charles McGee, who's the oldest living member of the Tuskegee Airmen, and Councilmember Jawanda will be presenting a proclamation. Please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to move down there shortly, but before I do that, I want to bring everyone's attention to the screen. We're going to have a brief 2-minute video just so the millions watching at home, as I like to say, can know everything a little bit about, scratch the surface of Brigadier General Charles McGee, and then we'll bring him down and I'll come down and present the proclamation along with my colleagues.
I'm Charles Edward McGee, Air Force retired, and originally I was born in Cleveland, Ohio in 1919. Tuskegee Airmen are black pilots, mechanics, and support people who, when our country declared war against Hitler, came forward and dispelled the biases and generalizations that because of the color of our skin we couldn't support our country in a technical area. Our task was to keep the air clear of German fighters that were destroying many of our bombers. You know, we thought we had enough guns on the B-17s and B-24s to protect them. That wasn't so, and that's why the escort work began. We also destroyed a lot of Germany's war-making potential on the ground. The Pittsburgh Courier came out and said, no, this is a double victory activity for black Americans, fighting against Hitler in Europe and also fighting against racism here at home. One thing personally, folks say, well, how did you face that? I said, well, I grew up learning that, you treat others like you want to be treated. So important. And then realizing that the value lessons that sustained us are just as important for the young people today and what they faced for America's future and preserving the freedoms we claim we all so much enjoy. Don't let the circumstances be an excuse for not achieving. We could have very easily, they don't like me, they don't want me, and gone off in the corner with our head bowed. That's not the American way.
General McGree, do you want to join me up here so we can serenade you properly? This is an emotional and a very humbling day for all of us here. Take your time, sir. And I want to thank everyone for being here. I want to give a special recognition to Yvonne McGee, who is General McGee. She reminded me to say youngest daughter.
Wow.
I also want to acknowledge a gentleman who is with General McGee. Is it Vincent Mickens, who arranged on both his 99th and 100th birthday to fly in a jet, which he's done for the last 2 years. And so I hope I can join on 101, but we'll see what happens. But want to thank you for being here. I also want to acknowledge the president of our school board, Ms. Shebra Evans, who is here. And we also have, sitting next to her is the president of my house, Michelle Jawando, who's here. And we have Sheriff Popkin, who's here as well, and our state's attorney, John McCarthy, who is also here. Appreciate it. We also have members of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, the Iota Upsilon Lambda chapter, which is our Silver Spring, Montgomery County chapter that we are both members of, and in the greatest fraternity in the history of the world, by the way. 06, all right. Martin Luther King Jr., Thurgood Marshall, Charles Hamilton Houston, and Brigadier General Charles McGee are some of the folks in that fraternity that I have the honor of being in as well. We may be joined by our county executive at some point, and if so, I'll acknowledge him. But on the county council, we have the opportunity, we do this a lot, to give a lot of citations, recognizing many incredible people. But I dare say that today is going to rank among the highest honors that we have had as a body. And I say this on behalf of every one of my colleagues. And to honor you, Brigadier General McGee. And Councilmember Rice, I want to invite Councilmember Rice down, who is a former airman himself. He's going to say a few words as well. Our fraternity says that we are, first of all, servants of all, and we shall transcend all. And I know it's special. I think I speak for Craig and I, Councilmember Rice and I, as the two African-American members of this council in Black History Month this year, at this time in our country, to be able to stand here with you, sir, and honor all that you've done and meant for our nation, for everyone of every creed, race, religion, age, but particularly for us as African-Americans and African-American men, the excellence that you have demonstrated over the course of your career, both professionally and personally. I've had the deep honor of getting to know you as a younger man, knowing members of your family, Damona Strautmanis and Michael Strautmanis, and meeting other members of your family. So I've got to meet the man, the myth, and the legend. And I can tell you, every one of those people has had the highest integrity, has been a model for me, and you continue to inspire me, sir. So I just want to say, there's nothing we could say here today to honor you enough and thank you for what you went through on behalf of our country. And so thank you very much for being here. I'm going to invite Councilmember Rice. You can have a seat or stand whenever you'd like, and he's going to say a few words.
I'm going to be very brief, and I really want to thank Councilmember Jawando for recognizing this great man. Brigadier General, let me just say thank you. Because as a young man growing up whose father served in Vietnam, who ably served his country, and who was able to dream about flying airplanes, on behalf of the United States of America, I say thank you. You forged the way and made it possible for young men like me to dream about doing the same things that you did. you forged that pathway, and that is something that you don't understand how it has impacted so many people and opened up so many opportunities. When I was down in Corpus Christi, Texas, flying A4s and A6s, I can tell you that folks knew and understood about the Tuskegee Airmen and what they did to make that possible for people like myself. And so for that, sir, not only are we deeply indebted for the service that you gave to our country, but for changing the paradigm with which I, as a young man who also went to University of Illinois, so big shoulders to stand upon. I'm really grateful for you, for all that you have done, for all of the aviators who follow in your footsteps. So thank you, sir.
So we're going to present you with this proclamation. I should note that Brigadier General McGee recently celebrated his young 100th birthday. And I say, please, that deserves a round of applause. Councilmember Katz said, I hope I look that good when I'm 100. And I think we all share that sentiment. I know, I know. So I'm going to read this proclamation with Councilmember Rice. We will alternate, and then I would ask all my colleagues to come down and take a picture with the general here. The County Council of Montgomery County, Maryland issues this proclamation. Whereas on December 20th, 2019, Colonel Charles E. McGee received an honorary promotion to the rank of Brigadier General, a well-deserved recognition of his incredible service to our country.
And whereas Brigadier General McGee has the distinction of being the oldest living member of the 332nd Fighter Group of the famed Tuskegee Airmen, fondly nicknamed the Red Tails, and is a beloved resident of Montgomery County who recently celebrated his 100th birthday, and
whereas Brigadier General McGee was sworn into the enlisted reserve in October 1942, earned his silver wings as a single-engine pilot, and was commissioned second lieutenant on June 30, 1943, graduating at Tuskegee Army Airfield in Alabama in Class 43F. And
whereas Brigadier General McGee became a command pilot and accumulated more than 6,300 total hours flying fighter aircraft combat tours in 3 major military conflicts: Italy during World War II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War. During his 30-year active duty career, Brigadier General McGee achieved a 3 war fighter mission total of 409 combat missions, one of the highest by an Air Force fighter pilot. And
Brigadier General McGee is the recipient of numerous awards and decorations, including the Legion of Merit with Oak Leaf Cluster, the Distinguished Flying Cross with 2 Oak Leaf Clusters, the Bronze Star, the Air Medal with 25 Oak Leaf Clusters, the Army and Air Force Commendation Medals, the Presidential Unit Citation, the Korean Presidential Unit Citation, several campaign and service ribbons, and the Congressional Gold Medal, and recently the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the County Council of Montgomery County, Maryland, hereby honors and salutes Brigadier General Charles E. McGee, and be it further resolved that the County Council thanks you for your lifelong dedication to service in keeping the residents of our country safe, and for all that you overcame in the process. Signed this day, the 25th of February, in the year 2020, by myself and all of my council colleagues. Please join me in giving a rounding sound of applause to General McGee. And I want to offer him the opportunity to say a few words.
Thank you isn't enough, but it's the words we use always to thank. But life has been a blessing for me. I often ask, why me, how me, and so on. I have not found the answer, but I do know life has been led by the good Lord, because otherwise I probably wouldn't be here. But thank you so much for the recognition, and I receive it, but I am proud to stand for the more than 900 pilots and the more than 14,000 people that supported us when our country needed the help, and there were so many who said, you can't do it. That keeps me out of the rocking chair today, because that same message and the value lessons are good for the young people of today who are America's tomorrow. We need to stop telling them they can't do something and lead them in the direction that allow us very shortly to put a woman on the moon and somebody on Mars. I'm indeed grateful to stand for so many, and thank you, thank you, thank you.
As we're coming up taking the picture, we also want to recognize that we have another African American general in our midst, General Art Holmes. Thank you very much.
Squeeze it just a little bit more together, please.
Everyone shoot to your left. Shoot to your left.
That's right. Okay, everybody smile, please. Couple more seconds. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Okay. father was. Yeah.
Where did he serve?
No, he served the war in Mississippi.
He was lucky.
Yeah.
Good.
He was a food buyer in Mississippi. My brother Alan was in Vietnam.
That's what I remember. Yeah.
Could we have one last round of applause, please, for the general? And General, you're invited back next year for your 101st birthday as well. You've truly honored us. I did want to recognize that Ken Reichert is here from Senator Cardin's office, and we wanted to thank him for joining us this morning as well. We're now going to go back to our regularly scheduled agenda, and next is a proclamation from Councilmember Rice recognizing a council member for a day.
Thank you very much, Council President. And this is truly a time in which we can celebrate Black history. It is our first African American council member for a day. So you're starting history, Joe. I want to introduce you to a phenomenal young woman. Ajo Ivanla is a senior at Northwest High School. She is the captain of the forensic speech and debate team. She's an AXO participant, a CEO of Pouchful, whose mission is to provide environmentally friendly, practical, sustainable lunch bags for students. She's interested in law, journalism, and business. And as you heard from the general, she can pretty much accomplish anything that she sets her mind to. I will just say that it's pretty interesting. A lot of people wonder how it is that we make the decisions we do about council member for a day, and why do we end up choosing the people that we do? Well, we want to pick something to where a topic is relevant, that we think is pertinent in the community. These students pick and choose their own topics. They defend their positions. Some of them may be positions that we may not feel are the same positions as us, but as long as they're defending their position and showcasing why it is that these issues are important, we make sure that they are at the top. And I will tell you that this young woman's essay dealing with vaping hit home. It really hit home because it talks about the struggles that we see and was incredibly pertinent to the challenges that we have upon us right now. But it was no surprise that she was able to defend and support her topic because of her oration skills. And let me just say that a lot of people don't know this, but she actually just recently won WJZ 13's orator contest that had folks from all across the District of Columbia and Maryland and Virginia participate and compete, and she was the first place winner. So I really want to thank Sonia Healy and all of our folks in our team that worked along with my staff to pick what I feel is a great representation of young people here in Montgomery County. Our future is bright, folks, because when we have young leaders like this, I know that great things are going to abound. You know, I want to just read you one of the things that she said. She said, "I've witnessed empty jewel pods littered about campus and cohorts who have had the audacity to recharge their vape pens using school equipment. Speaking of audacity, a classmate was so bold as to jewel next to me on our way to a field trip. All levels of government can address teen vaping by putting more of an emphasis on prevention in their daily lives, whether it be through legislation, having conversations, creating safe spaces, or providing resources. We can lower the number of vaping teens one effort at a time." Sounds like a press conference that Councilmember Albornoz and I just had dealing with vaping. So, I'm going to read our proclamation for Ajo Avanla, a senior at Northwest High School in Germantown, who participated in our 4th annual Council Member for a Day that requires applicants to submit an essay or video reflecting on important policy issues. And whereas the Council Member for a Day Challenge was created to spark interest and provide access to local government operations, as well as to deepen an understanding of and promote activism on public policy issues that are important to our county youth by shadowing the Montgomery County Council Chair of the Education and Culture Committee for one day. And whereas Ms. Avanla submitted an exceptional essay along with 9 other Montgomery County middle and high school students who were selected as finalists, and she received special recognition at the Council's Youth Town Hall on November 13th of this past year. And whereas Ms. Avanla's winning essay addressed the important public issue of teen vaping and offered solutions for national, state, and local leaders to respond to this public health crisis, thereby demonstrating her passion and depth of knowledge that are required for public service. I want to say again, that are required for public service. I always try and make sure that my young people remember that public service is a great thing. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the County Council of Montgomery County, Maryland hereby congratulates Ajo Avanla, and be it further resolved that the County Council recognizes her service to Montgomery County as the 2019 Honorary Council Member for a Day, presented on this 25th day of February in the year 2020, signed by myself and Sydney Katz, our Council President. Ajo, congratulations.
Good morning, everyone.
morning.
It is such an honor to be here today and to have this opportunity. Thank you, Councilmember Rice, and thank you to the entire council for allowing me to be here today. Vape is an issue that's important to me because our generation really could have been the generation that stopped smoking. We know the dangers of cigarettes. It's widespread at this point, and Jewel kind of just ruined that for us, but that doesn't mean it's too late, and it doesn't mean that we can't fight. Recently, I produced a documentary with the Gandhi Brigade Youth Media Council on the effects of vaping with youth, and to have this opportunity to sit on the dais and speak out about it really means a lot to me. Thank you.
I would like to ask my colleagues to come down, and as they do, we're going to present you with your council member pin.
This is our official inauguration. She spoke more than we spoke.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to have a proclamation recognizing Teen Dating Violence Prevention Awareness Month. And if the county executive is not here yet?
He's unable to attend.
He's unable to attend? Okay. If I could please invite everyone who's associated with this proclamation to please come forward. And I'm going to ask you each to introduce yourselves.
Acting Assistant Chief Ronald Smith, Montgomery County Police.
John McCarthy, State's Attorney for Montgomery County.
Darrell Popkin, I'm the sheriff here in Montgomery County.
Debbie Feinstein, Chief of the Special Victims Division for the State's Attorney's Office and Chair of the Domestic Violence Coordinating Council.
Sam Schwan, intern.
Smita Varaya, Program Manager, Domestic Violence Coordinating Council.
Amy Palumbo, Director of DVS Legal Services.
Eshigo Akasile, Community Member, Domestic Violence Coordinating Council.
Lieutenant Gerald McFarland, Deputy Director of the Special Victims Investigations Division, Montgomery County Police.
Jody Finkelstein, Executive Director of the Montgomery County Commission for Women, also here on behalf of the County Executive.
Please tell him I read his part on the proclamation. But first off, thank you all for being here today, and thank you for all that you're doing for all of us every day. This is a proclamation from the Montgomery County. Whereas teen dating violence includes physical, sexual, psychological, emotional, financial, and technological abuse and stalking, and occurs within dating relationships when one partner seeks to gain power and control over another person, and 1 in 3 females and 1 in 7 males report experiencing teen dating violence. 1 in 10 Maryland high school students report experiencing physical violence in a dating relationship, and 1 in 10 report experiencing sexual violence in a dating relationship. And whereas February is Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month, and provides an opportunity for our community to acknowledge the prevalence of teen dating violence and to promote education and this issue for our citizens. And the Montgomery County Domestic Violence Coordinating Council offers the Choose Respect Prevention Initiative, which includes educational programs, a public service announcement competition, programs for teen athletes, and a community-wide festival, Respect Fest 2020, on March 29, 2020, at the Wheaton Community Recreation Center. And Choose Respect is supported by the Montgomery County Family Justice Center and its many partner agencies who offer services and support for teens. And whereas together we can reduce the incidence of dating violence in Montgomery County through public awareness, now therefore do we, Mark Elridge as County Executive and Sidney Katz as County Council President, hereby proclaim February 2020 as Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month in Montgomery County. We ask our community to recognize the pervasive problem of teen dating violence, to engage in education and prevention efforts to support our friends and families in the process of seeking services, and to spread the word about the help available through the Family Justice Center. It's signed by the county executive and by me. And who would you like to say a few words? Please.
Thank you so much to Councilmember President Tiffany Katz, and to everyone that's here today, and our wonderful collaboration between the Police Department, the Family Justice Center, the Sheriff's Office, Montgomery County Public Schools. I see the President of the Board here, the Commission for Women, and DVS Legal Services, and all of our wonderful partners. Teen dating violence, as was mentioned in the proclamation, is a pervasive problem, not only in our community, but around the country. 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 7 boys will be directly impacted by teen dating violence, and 1 in 10 is a victim of physical violence. This is a serious issue, and we are very excited on March 29th to celebrate and healthy relationships and to raise awareness around this issue. Please join us on March 29th at the Wheaton Recreation and Community Center, where we're going to have a wonderful day of activities. Students have the opportunity to earn SSL hours. It is a free event sponsored by all of the organizations that you see here and co-sponsored by Montgomery County Public Schools. Thank you so much, and thank you to the council, and thank you to so many of you for wearing orange, to recognize that orange stands for Teen Dating Violence Prevention, stands for love, and that we should support healthy relationships for everyone. Thank you so much.
Burnt orange counts. Yeah, good idea.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, do we have any announcements or petitions?
Yes, we do. Good morning, President Katz. Under general business, we have a few announcements. The public hearing for the zoning text amendment 20-02, accessory structures, originally scheduled for March 3rd, has been canceled. Also, the council is seeking applicants for the Board of Appeals. This position can only be filled by a Republican, a voter who is unaffiliated with a party, or a voter who is a member of another party officially recognized by the Board of Elections. The position cannot be filled by a Democrat. The deadline for applications has been extended to February 26, 2020 at 5 p.m. We have 2 petitions. We have 1 petition from the residents of South Bradley Hills neighborhood supporting the accelerated implementation of CIP Bradley Boulevard improvements. And we have another petition from residents of Montgomery County supporting a name change for the Washington National Football League team. In addition, Mr. President Katz, we have an addendum with a few items. We have an announcement that the public hearing and action on a supplemental appropriation to the county government's FY20 operating budget, Department of Police, for $1,436,172 for school safety FY20 resource officer grant is scheduled for March 3rd, 2020 at 1:30 p.m. We also have a couple of corrections to the current agenda. On the consent agenda for the introduction for the supplemental appropriation to the Montgomery County Public Schools FY20 operating budget for $351,050 and $351,050 for the Alfred Noyes Pilot Project grant. The public hearing action will tentatively be scheduled now for March 10th. at 1:30 p.m. We also have a change to the introduction for the supplemental appropriation to the county government's FY20 operating budget for the Community Engagement Cluster, Office of Community Partnerships for $581,700 for 2020 Census Grant Program. That public hearing and action is tentatively scheduled now for March 10, 2020 at 1:30 p.m. On the consent calendar, letter G for action, the resolution condemning the recent SCOTUS decision on public charge. The staff person for that is Cruz, not McMillan. And for the action for J, we're looking at the confirmation of the county executive's appointments to the Housing Opportunities Commission for Francis Kelleher and Roy Priest. Finally, the brown bag lunch with the regional service directors for today at 12:30 has been canceled.
Thank you very much. The minutes have been distributed for January 27th and January 28th, 2020. Unless there are any corrections, they will be approved as received, and I do not see any corrections, so they are approved. Next is our consent calendar. Is there a motion? It's been moved by Councilmember Navarro and seconded by Councilmember Giwando. I never know who's doing the seconds. Councilmember Giwando and Councilmember Albornoz, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. We will formally be taking action today to take into effect the resolution my colleagues have unanimously supported to denounce the public charge ruling by our Supreme Court several weeks ago. I want to in particular thank all of my colleagues, not just for supporting this bill. We had a very emotional press conference a couple weeks ago, and I want to thank Sydney and Will and Nancy for helping me get through it. And I don't think I would have gotten through it without all of you. I just want to note a couple of things. The public charge went into effect yesterday. And there, obviously, it's a devastating ruling that impacts families and forces a number of families here in Montgomery County and across the country to make the impossible decision of having to choose between accessing services that they and their families so critically need and deciding whether or not to not access those services so that they are more likely to secure permanent residency and citizenship. This is immoral, it's wrong, and it unfortunately follows a pattern of attacks on our immigration system and immigrants across this entire country. I want to stress that the services that we offer locally within our Department of Health and Human Services and all of our county services are not included in this ruling. And while there is a great deal of confusion with regards to who is and who is not impacted by this, I urge families who have questions to access a website that has been noted with very strong and correct information, and that website is protectingimmigrantfamilies.org. Again, protectingimmigrantfamilies.org. And if you have questions regarding whether or not this impacts you with regards to county services, our Department of Health and Human Services has been working diligently to ensure that their staff has the latest information as well. And so residents will also be able to access our county's Health and Human Services Department. Once again, I want to thank my colleagues. We have to bound together through these remarkably difficult times. We will get through them. We will be stronger as a result of them. But in the meantime, we have to huddle and do everything that we can to protect all of our families, especially those most vulnerable here in Montgomery County. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you. I want to express my appreciation to Councilmember Albornoz. When he mentioned this to me, of course, I said we have to definitely continue in the tradition, I think, of this council. I mean, every step of the way, this council has always stood up when it came to attacks on any of our residents and any of our communities. And it's because it's just common sense. We have heard time and time again how these particular decisions affect so many families in such a negative way. It really does spread fear. It spreads a sense and it establishes a sense of just feeling under threat. And, every morning we all turn on and listen to the news or watch the news or whatever. And right now we're tracking and monitoring the COVID-19 spread and things of that nature. You cannot underestimate the impact that these kinds of decisions have on things like public health. We just yesterday had a meeting with the Consulate of El Salvador coming to talk to us about their desire to be able to provide some support and some services here in our county, because they understand that these communities are constantly feeling under threat, that the trauma is real, that the real impact cannot be underestimated. And so it is important for us to acknowledge that, number one, we always are the ones that have to step up, because when the federal government does this, the local governments have to step up. We will do that. But more than anything, it's so important to send that message to every single member of our community to please access those services that you are entitled to access. That children should not be going hungry in schools, because we have heard that sometimes parents don't even want to access free and reduced meals or things like child care subsidies, just out of fear and not understanding exactly what the implication is of these kinds of horrible, horrible policies. So thank you again, and thanks to all my colleagues for once again stepping up. As always, it is a tradition here in Montgomery County. I also wanted to congratulate Francis Kelleher and Roy Priest for their appointment to the Housing Opportunity Commission. It's so important. This commission, HOC, is playing a very important role and will continue to play an important role in our goal of achieving the targets for affordable housing and looking at innovative ways. We have to be in partnership with every single organization or commission that can help us in this process, so I really appreciate that. And lastly, we're going to hear an update on Census 2020. I requested this update because it is so important, it's upon us. And there is such amazing work happening here in our county and in the region. And it's important for us to hear and for us to amplify and support that work. But on the consent calendar, there is a supplemental appropriation request for $581,700 for the 2020 Census Grant Program. That's going to be really critical. It's all connected. We have so many communities who, again, feel under threat and feel that perhaps they do not want to fill out the census form. And we need to get the message out there that it is imperative that they do fill out the census form, that it is imperative for us to be able to access those dollars that we need, but also for representation. And we have an amazing team here in Montgomery County doing great work on this issue. So just wanted to flag that, and I look forward to supporting all of these items. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank my colleague, Councilmember Albornoz, for his leadership in the public charge resolution, recognizing that we need to protect all of our residents here in Montgomery County, home to 4 of the 10 most diverse communities in the entire country, and that does not come easily. We need to protect our diversity, support our diversity, celebrate our diversity. So thank you with that. And speaking of communities, I want to thank my colleagues for the unanimous support to recognize Washington, D.C. as the 51st state, a movement that has gone national, a movement that is part of the presidential campaign, quite frankly, because it is all about fairness, representation, and democracy. So I look forward at a future time to travel into Douglas Commonwealth for an evening out or just to see friends and family with 700,000 residents in that jurisdiction. So I look forward to the day when we can expand our democratic values to our nation's capital. And then lastly, item J, I also would like to express my pleasure in the official confirmation of Dr. Francis Kelleher and Mr. Roy Priest to the Housing Opportunities Commission, but I also do want to note that there is one more vacancy on that commission. And in order for us to continue doing the important work of providing housing for everyone who needs it, we need a full complement on that commission. So I hope the executive will put forth a new nomination in the near future. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilmember Jawanda.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also look forward to the future visits to the Douglas Commonwealth, named after the great Marylander Frederick Douglass. It's one of the many reasons we're connected so to the hip with Washington, and that injustice of denying, on the same day we honored Brigadier General McGee, who fought so ably over 3 wars, I often think about the many, many thousands of people who have dedicated their life to the armed services that have come from the Washington, D.C., have not had the right to vote for their senators and have full representation and have a voice in the Congress. It's an outrage. I think we forget about it. It's become commonplace. And like this public charge, which I also want to speak to, when there are these injustices in this type of policy, we have to speak out and advocate for our neighbors. I thank Councilmember Albanaz and Navarro and Katz. That was an emotional press conference, but we needed to have it because people need to know that no matter who you are valued here in Montgomery County. And we're the best county and the best state in the country, in my opinion, because we have such a diversity. I mean, just on this council, the stories of how we all got here and how our parents or our grandparents got here is really a testament to the strength of not only this community, but the nation. And anyone who would seek to stop that is not being American. You know, there's been tons of studies out about all the contributions of immigrants. This policy was followed by the travel ban policy, which I discussed, where many African countries, including the home of my father, Nigeria, was added to the list, where you have people in the U.S. from Nigeria with the highest educational attainment, higher than even native-born U.S. Americans, and we're going to restrict people here to start jobs and businesses and grow our economy. It makes no sense. Not only morally wrong, it's economically wrong. So I'm glad we're taking a stand, and I appreciate my colleagues unanimously supporting it. And finally, I also want to say to Dr. Kelleher and Rory Priest, I don't think they're here, but they may be watching, very impressed with your service on HOC and look forward to working with you to make sure that we continue to expand affordable housing and give people safe places to live all across the county. So with that, I thank the President.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Rice.
Thank you very much, Council President. I wanted to echo the sentiments of appreciation for recognizing all of the folks that are in our community who oftentimes are relegated to live in the shadows out of fear of persecution simply by the reason of them coming by different means. The reality is that when people are here, they're here, and we should care for them as though they're our own. Our fellow neighbors, we don't ask them whether or not they have documentation before we let our children play together. We don't ask them whether they have documentation as to whether or not we shop at the same places or invite them over for a barbecue. We don't ask any of those things when it comes to us living our lives. And so why would we then put these same friends, these same neighbors, the same people in our community through all of this turmoil for the sake of saying that we're somehow better than someone else? You know, it's interesting, this past Sunday, I had an opportunity to speak about the importance of voting. And I started talking about the fact that in the Bible it says that there is no separation amongst people, that all of God's people are one. And so for some reason, I don't know where we spun off track and thought that the United States of America is so much better than other countries. Where did we get off thinking that the United States is the best and none of these other countries are also not great? This whole ideology around America being great and nobody else isn't genuine to who we are as people, as a human race. We are all equal. And why we continue to profess then and support these policies, and I know we up here aren't doing it, but there are people in our community that do. My plea to them is to stop. Look to your heart. What do you really believe about that person? Do you really believe that that person is out to get you? That they're out to take something away from you? The reality is they're trying to live their lives and do the best that they can, just like you. That's all they're here for. We're here for such a short time on this earth, and we can make such a difference if we focus on the positive and making our world a better place instead of dividing us. And so in that same means, we have a lot of people who are to the south of us right now who are unrepresented. Our folks in the District of Columbia who continue to not have a voice when it comes to issues that are important to them, who don't have a representative government that has the same powers that we do, the same privileges and rights that we do, however, pay the same taxes that we do, that are required to adhere to the same federal laws that we do. It is about time that we give them the rights. And oh, by the way, as we're supporting the District of Columbia, let us not also forget about our brothers and sisters in Puerto Rico, who also deserve that same sort of representation as well. I really feel as though this is an opportunity for us to continue to lift up, making sure that we value everyone and show this world that the United States can be a great experiment, one that shows that if we really focus on what we know is important, which is taking care of one another, lifting each other up, making sure that we live out our best lives, will be one of the best places in the world, and we can be an even greater community and society. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. And I, too, want to join in the chorus that talks about the congratulations to the Housing Opportunity Commissioners for their appointment, reappointment. I also am very pleased to be supporting the D.C. statehood. But to the point that Councilmember Albornoz and Navarro and Jawando, all of us made at the press conference about the resolution condemning the recent Supreme Court decision on public charge, you know, all of us came from very different backgrounds. All of us came with, in my case, was my grandparents came 102 years ago. Others have come more recently, but all of us came, all of our families came for the same very, very reason, and that is so that they were looking for a better life for themselves, for their children, and for their grandchildren and great-grandchildren. That's what's happened in all of our families, and I believe that it is necessary to remind everyone that that is exactly what America is about. So with that, we have a motion and a second to approve our consent calendar. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? It carries unanimously, and it's a 10-0 vote. It's rare that happens, but we have a 10-0 vote. So we're very, very pleased, especially for today.
Mr. President, if I may, I just wanted to say that as I was talking to Councilmember Ivanla, she said, I really came on the right day. And it really is something. It really is something to see that all of these great things that young people can see are happening in our local government, and the commitment that we have to people is what we're showcasing to our young people. So thank you for that, sir.
And thank you. And you truly did come on the right day, but I have to tell you, every day is the right day. So anyhow. The next item that we have is a confirmation of the County Executive Appointment Chief Equity Officer Tiffany Ward. We need a motion. Oh, you have a light on. It's covered, but it's Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you so much. So I would like to move that we appoint Tiffany Ward to the position of Chief Equity Officer as she's coming up. I'd like to say that so I've had the opportunity to, interact with Tiffany here and there and everywhere as she graced us with her presence on the used to be 6th floor, and then it was the 5th floor, as she worked in then Councilmember Mark Elrich's office. And Tiffany is the kind of person that I think has always exemplified a consistent dedication to ensuring that we all maintain a high level of and process of learning about the different issues affecting many of the communities that are disproportionately affected by so many disparities. She has always been a steward of ensuring that all of us on the county council keep our feet to the fire and understanding all these very complex issues in a way that has always been collaborative, productive, and from a place of, I think, understanding. And so I was really excited when then County Executive Elrich decided to appoint Tiffany to be the manager for the racial equity and social justice work, because as we had meetings early on, I think it was a couple of years ago, to begin to talk about racial equity and social justice, I knew that she was the right person to manage this process, but now also to direct this very important work. My staff has just, really enjoyed working with you, Tiffany, hand in hand as we try to put together a framework to achieve this racial equity and social justice legislation. Not an easy feat by no means, but incredible that we were able to do it. And I think it's, again, a testament to this community, this county, the elected leadership in this county, which is rare. And I oftentimes joke that sometimes I feel like constituents get a little upset because here we are, as elected officials really pushing forward on these issues that takes other jurisdictions years and years and years to convince the elected leadership to do something. But here we do it. We just do it and we commit to it and we move forward. So it is just a great pleasure for me to be able to nominate you for this position. I feel like the racial equity and social justice is a bill that was kind of like a baby, and now that the baby has been birthed, it's kind of like, here you go, Tiffany, take it. No pressure, but important to highlight that this is the beginning of a very important transformative process for our county, and it will be, it'll take time. And we will all be patient, but we will work with you to make sure that everything moves forward in the way that it should be forward. So that was my long way of saying that I'm just so proud and excited to nominate you for this position.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will slightly, in a shorter fashion, be the official second for the nomination of Tiffany Ward to this position. I couldn't agree with everything that Councilmember Navarro said, and again, always want to commend you for your work to create this moment, make it possible so that we could be here ready to confirm the first ever equity officer in Montgomery County in this position. And we couldn't have a better person before us. The commitment, I said this when we had your interview, the commitment you've had to all people, and the depth of knowledge that you have, and also the fact that you're humble and you know that you don't know everything. And I've said that I think that's such an important position to have, a quality to have in leadership, and particularly when we're stepping out, as Councilmember Navarro said, ahead of many jurisdictions and trying to figure this out as the rest of the country is trying to figure out how do we become that beloved community and be a place where everyone has opportunity in this experiment that is America, this relatively young experiment, and to have this type of framework on public policy. This is not, there's no playbook. There's some best practices, but there's no one's figured this out. And to have you shepherding us is an honor, and it's going to be a great experience, and we are here to support you. Make sure you have the resources you need. Make sure that it stays front and center, that it's not an isolated department, that it's throughout all of government on both sides of the street, and that's our commitment. And I'll share an embarrassing story as I close. When Ms. Ward was, when her former boss and current boss, then County Councilmember Elrich, was running for office, I said, well, hey, if he doesn't win, I'm hiring you, okay? And I'm sure other people said that to you, but I'm going to say it out loud. And it was a perfect example of when you can ask the Lord for something that you want, but he's going to give you what you need. And it's better that you are where you are and that I get to work with you as a colleague. And it's better for the county, and it's better for the residents here. And so it's an honor to second your motion today.
Thank you very much. It has been moved by Councilmember Navarro, seconded by Councilmember Jawando, that we approve Tiffany Ward. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? Tiffany, you got a 10-0. It's rare that happens, too.
I just want to thank you all for your support in this work from the very beginning up until this day and through the duration, and just say I'm really honored to run this first leg of this long race, but really honored to take this on. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we're going to is an action item for the special appropriation for from the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commissions, $300,000 to expedite funding of consultant services for the I-270 Transit Corridor Plan. And that the Fed Committee did make a recommendation, and we're going to hear from the chair.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate the council's deliberation and request that we really peel this back a bit more and understand what we're looking at so that the full council can be better briefed on the proposal. So we did that yesterday at the committee, and I'm passing out a memorandum that the planning department prepared for us, and we unanimously recommended to the full council to proceed with the appropriation. I will invite the planning team to share some comments about the goals here, but I'll just say from a big picture, this project is aligned with our general plan process, and it is the way that we're going to think about some big picture transit options that really we don't have a tool to consider. Two examples. One is the MARC and what the potential of MARC really could be in this county. And the state has, many years ago, Governor O'Malley put together a certain vision of the MARC and for a statewide expansion, but did not really follow up on that. And we have long called for expansion of MARC, but this study could really allow us to do more evaluation of what the potential is if we focus on that. A second option or system is the red line. I think a lot of our residents want to know why we aren't pushing for expansion of the red line. And, I just read in the paper the other day about Prince William County is seeking to extend Metro into Prince William County. Where is our process to dive into that issue for the county and consider whether there's something there that we could put on the table? And of course the original motivation here is thinking big picture about the county and how we can provide transit solutions that will help, as Director Wright said yesterday and Chairman Anderson said, with the essential task of getting to Northern Virginia, which we lack a transit connection there as well. But then there's also a short-term practical need, which is to help us rethink the zoning for the Great Seneca Science Corridor. And so really we're here today because the planning department said if we're going to rethink the zoning in the Great Seneca Science Corridor, we could really benefit from having some additional transportation analysis to help us figure out how that comes together. And so we agreed that if we're going to proceed with the request to rethink the zoning for that area, then we would accelerate this project, which is both big picture and granular, to help the planning department come up with recommendations for us there. And so that really is the origin of it. County executive, urged us not to proceed. Didn't support the amendment to rethink the zoning for the Great Seneca Science Corridor. I think that's an important element here, and I'm not sure how we're supposed to proceed with that project if we allow the executive branch, which doesn't support this, to really have a lot more control over the transportation analysis. So the council really needs to have its own process here, and fundamentally that's what this is about: is looking at the big picture, looking at the small picture. So again, I've distributed to the council the memorandum that was prepared, and I will ask Casey and Gwen, would you like to just make any comments about this project as we discuss this today?
Yeah, we're just, for the record, Gwen Wright, Planning Director. I just wanted to reiterate that we're very, very excited to undertake this project, which was assigned to us by the council last spring. and which we then discussed in December, and you approved accelerating the schedule for it. We think this is a very important project. There are many different ideas and threads out there thinking about transit along the I-270 corridor, and it is important for this council to have the information necessary to make good decisions and set priorities as different proposals come forward. We really are excited about going beyond just looking at individual segments or individual projects, and really look holistically at how we create great transit connections between Frederick and Tysons. And that is really the goal of this project, and to weave together the many different ideas for transit that are out there, and to help this body set their goals and their priorities and decide which projects to really champion and move forward with. So that's it, unless you have questions.
Thank you. Casey, did you have anything to add?
Well, just to say that it's not just about prioritization, but this is actually a master planning exercise. So to the extent that we need to make modifications or even additions to projects that are not yet planned, that can be accommodated. And as we discussed at some length yesterday, it's necessary to bring it through the Planning Department, Planning Board, and County Council in order to make that possible.
Thank you. Are you finished with yours? Yeah. Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President. And as a district council member who has a lot of what we're talking about here today, let me just share the importance of this. As I was talking with Councilmember Ivanla, we were talking about her commute this morning and how challenging it is to get from portions of the Up County here, and the limited options that are provided to young people. And it really is one in which having more mass transit options, having us think creatively and outside of the box, and a time in which we can also talk about housing policy, which I know the council member also has some opinions about, are incredibly important. Affordable housing and making sure that that is not just in areas that promote it being affordable, but that also make sure that it's connected to viable hubs where we know that there's workforce. As we continue to try and promote workforce in these other areas, the reality is that we know Gaithersburg, Rockville, Bethesda, all of the Silver Spring, all of those areas are great economic hubs and are places where workforce abounds. And so how do we greater connect where we have our affordable housing in those areas, and thinking about that via mechanisms like this, and how we can continue to develop and make sure that we're appropriately devising that housing that still is affordable, but at the same time then connecting that to a lot of our hubs is incredibly important. And so that's why this mission, we asked you to embark on this and start thinking about different kinds of modalities that would allow us to do that when it comes to the opportunity that we have with this new widening approach with I-270. And I shouldn't necessarily say widening, with us repurposing lanes in area. I scare people when I say widening. But it just really is important. And the people who we oftentimes don't hear from, who don't come to these public hearings, who don't have the opportunity to come here to the council, but have an opinion and have a voice, are wanting and needing this. And so I just really want to say thank you for rolling up your sleeves and doing the tough work to make our constituents' lives better. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Vice President Hucker.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to echo the words of the district council member. Certainly everybody on our T&E committee and everybody on this council really is acutely aware, I think, of the transportation needs, and in particular the transit needs of all the residents of the 270 corridor. And that's one reason I think this is so well-timed and appropriate. I'm glad that the packet reflected that if we can move forward with this study, it'll also benefit residents of the East County but in particular as well, potentially, and Silver Spring in the center of the county. Center of the down county, because of the need to do further analysis of the US 29 corridor for the flash bus that's coming in there, and especially in the White Oak to the Silver Spring Transit Center segment of it, and the need to extend that BRT corridor up to Howard County, where there's a lot of potential to do that, but we can't do it on our own with the resources we have. We really need the planning board to help us with that and their talented staff. While you're here, Mr. Chairman, I do want to thank you. This is really well timed because it follows the exercise we all went through over the last year regarding the Governor's Managed Lanes project. And that will move forward in amended version, and we really need objective analysis of that project and its amendments in the current posture to continue. And we'll benefit from your advice. But while you're here, I really want to thank you for your clear-eyed, objective analysis of that project and the analysis your staff forwarded. I wish Ms. Rubin were here to hear me say this too, because we would not have won, the million-plus residents of this county would not have won the benefits that we won in making that project better than it started out without your analysis. And I happened to read an opinion piece that appeared in the media that ascribed partisan motivations to the positions this council took and the county executive took. And I, for one, feel like that was really inappropriate. Former Delegate Rice and I learned on the first day of the 06 General Assembly never to ascribe motivations to your colleagues' political positions, because you don't know what is going on in their head and what their experience has been. And to say that we all had concerns about the Managed Lanes project because we happen to be Democrats is really, I think, demeaning and inappropriate. That's like saying we all care about climate change because we happen to be Democrats. The last election was a long way away. The next one's a long way away. On climate change, we follow the overwhelming scientific evidence. And on transportation, we follow the clear-eyed analysis of our nonpartisan transportation planners in your shop and our nonpartisan transportation staff in DOT, and the bipartisan commission that twice gave us guidance on the position this council should take. So we wouldn't have had those benefits without your advice. I'm grateful for that. It needs to continue, and that's why I'm supporting this study.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Giwando.
Thank you, Mr. President. And just wanted to clarify, I was talking with my colleague, we had an extensive discussion on this yesterday. The eastern part of the study is not included right now.
That's right.
But we do want to do it down the line, and I think I see nodding heads, and I think
I'm planting the flag.
Good. Well, yes, thank you very much. You know, and I was slipping up the mud trying to plant it yesterday, but you planted it today. So, and I also want to thank our staff, Dr. Orland and Pam Dunn, Ms. Dunn, for your analysis, working with planning and working with DOT. We got there eventually, and I think we all want the same thing. We want to analyze all these options, benefit from what's been studied before, come together with a strong plan for traffic relief and real transit options. So I think we're going to get there, and thank you for your analysis, Ms. Wright. This was very helpful, this memo. I know sometimes the sausage making is hard, but this was very helpful, and I think we all benefited from the in-depth analysis. So I'm also was happy to support it and look forward to moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to frame the conversation for those who are not aware of the nuances that we're talking about. You know, it's important to note that we all support further studies of the 270 corridor throughout the entire county, quite frankly, as my colleagues have mentioned, with regard to transportation opportunities, how we expand transportation, and particularly within this case, it's transit opportunities as well. We are all on the same page here. The question before us is which agency or department is best suited to conduct that study, whether it is the planning department or the Department of Transportation. And so as I've been thinking about this since we last had the conversation, I know that there is a $300,000 price tag associated with this that was allocated for expenditure in the next budget. And so I just have a clarifying question for the chair, for Mr. Anderson. The $300,000, if approved and it's used now, what will happen to that in next year's budget?
That will be $300,000 less we asked for in the operating budget.
$300,000 less you'll ask for in FY21 because it'll be used in FY20 for this project.
That's right.
Good answer. Thank you. And so that is very helpful to know. And then the other aspect that has put me in the position of supporting the planning department moving forward here is that the Department of Transportation has done numerous studies on transportation-related projects, and one most notably is the BRT project on Route 29. And there is a study that they conducted, yet we have not received their analysis. They're holding it. And so that gives me pause to allow the Department of Transportation to go forward with another study that they might or might not share with us. And so for that reason, I'm going to be supporting the Department of, the Planning Department moving forward with this, recognizing that there is a cost savings next year because it's upfronted, but I'll publicly say that the Department of Transportation needs to share with us the studies that they've done in other transit-related projects before I support their efforts to do more studies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you, and thank you, Councilmember Hucker, for planting the flag for the East County. I'll try to get some flowers to make sure that it looks real attractive, and Councilmember Jawanda will come and help water it and all of that stuff. But I really appreciate the Fed committee, taking the time to dig into this a little deeper. I definitely supported this from the very beginning. I think Councilmember Rice, as the district council member, was very clear, and we've all been really interested in how do we address a lot of these challenges, especially for the Up County. Obviously, when the communication came or was transmitted somehow that there might be $300,000 somewhere else, I was very interested in understanding whether that was the case. And so here we are again. I think that it is money well spent, and I believe that we would be able to gather quite a bit of information and also hopefully be able to figure out how we move forward with some concrete steps. So obviously very supportive from the get-go, just very interested in how this whole dynamic with the money was going to work out. But here we are, and I think it's fine, and it's, it just means that you'll be spending the money quicker, and please move forward, and thank you so much for your willingness also of doing the work.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Friedson.
I'll just be very brief. We talked quite a bit yesterday, and the Fed committee had a really good, thoughtful, robust discussion. I think that was appropriate. I think I'm glad that it went back to the Fed committee. We're able to get the thoughtful memo that we got from Ms. Wright in the planning department, which I think is really helpful. The one point that I made yesterday, I just wanted to reiterate here. This council, this body, is responsible for land use and zoning. And there's a lot more to transportation planning than just the number of people who utilize different modes of transportation. And we have a broader responsibility when it comes to where transportation infrastructure goes in terms of the environment, in terms of the economic development, in terms of quality of life, that transportation by its nature is not focused on, because that's not what their role is. That's why we designate the planning department and park and planning to do that technical work for us. And so as we recognize that there are other studies being undertaken, there are other entities doing important work in this space, somebody has to connect the dots and figure out how it all works together and how it meets the broader priorities that we have as a county. That is our responsibility. That is why we have the planning department there to help us do that work, and that's why I think this is so important, so that we can expand what we're talking about with potential $16 billion project at the state level, but talk about not just BRT, but MARC expansion and many other, red line expansion potentially, many other opportunities that may exist and how they all fit together. So this is about eliminating the silos. This is about, I think, taking responsibility for what is our job as the charter dictates, and making sure that we take control over a process that we ought to be out ahead in, so that the tail isn't wagging the dog, so to speak. So it's not about not working collaboratively. It is about specifically working collaboratively, but I think it is about making sure that we are taking responsibility for what is our job, and making sure that we are taking the broader view than each individual study or each individual department is responsible for, and I appreciate the fact that this council is taking that up, and the planning department is helping us do it.
Thank you. Councilmember Navarro.
I would be remiss if you just reminded me, Councilmember Feetson, that this very much fits into what we agreed to do, which was to adopt the economic development platform. And transportation is a part of that. It's connected to housing, it's connected to workforce development, it's connected to everything. And so I think it's very exciting that as we work on these particular individual issues, it's very exciting to see how we're making this platform come alive. And it has to be a very strategic take on it. So just wanted to point that out because I believe that this is a very unique way that we as a council have chosen to work in a very strategic framework. And this, to me, is another good example of that. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no other lights. I did want to note that I too was concerned about the $300,000. I understand that it's up front, we're changing but $300,000 is a lot of money. But I think at the end of the day, and that the Fed committee, when it went back to the Fed committee, I think it was handled the proper way, that we had a good discussion, and I believe that this, and I certainly am going to be supportive as well. With that, we have a committee recommendation. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, same sign, and that carries unanimously as well. Thank you very much. Next is the...
Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. Next is the legislative session, day 6. The first that we're going to be reading is Bill 6-20, Solid Waste, Trash, Release of Balloons Prohibited. The lead sponsor is Councilmember Hucker, and the public hearing is scheduled for a future date. Vice President Hucker.
Thank you, Mr. President. The good news is this won't be as complicated as transportation planning. I can tell you, colleagues, this issue wasn't really on my radar until the advocates brought it up with me nearly a year ago, but do a quick Google search on balloon releases, and you'll probably be surprised, as I was, about how often these are still held in our area. Mr. Rodriguez, our great regional service director from Silver Spring, is in the back, and one event in your newsletter recently, not an event you organized, just one you were publicizing, had a balloon release on Veterans Plaza in downtown Silver Spring. Seriously. These are quite common if you just Google them in funerals and memorial services, in some weddings and bar mitzvahs, in some corporate office openings, and set aside the idea that it's the fact that it's sort of advertised, organized littering, since these all come down. The reason for this bill is simply the hazard that balloons and the ribbons and other things that are attached to them pose to wildlife, particularly seabirds, turtles, and fish. And many, many marine birds and turtles end up starving after they ingest the balloons that come down. As you know, in our area, weather travels west to east. Some of these go a very far distance. We found in Maryland balloons from the Indianapolis 500. All the ones released in this area tend to end up in the Chesapeake Bay and its tributaries, and eventually the Atlantic, where they're ingested, as I mentioned, by seabirds and turtles as they wash ashore. There are nonprofits and academic studies that have gone out and monitored how many fragments are out there. And there's thousands found each year on the beaches in Virginia, for example, which has banned all these releases, along with 4 other states. And so it makes sense to do it too in Montgomery County as well. There's other jurisdictions, Baltimore, Ocean City, Queen Anne's County, and Frederick City, that have banned these releases, and now we anticipate a state bill passing. While I asked for this bill to be drafted, and there's been a lot of back and forth with advocates over the last year, and I didn't think we'd be at the place where the state bill is likely to pass, I do think we still need the local bill to help with our enforcement, because anybody who sees these advertised is going to call 311 or call the police non-emergency line. They're not going to call the Maryland State Police or the Maryland Department of the Environment. It's supported by the Sierra Club, the Audubon Naturalist Society, the Humane Society of the United States, and many other groups, so I hope you'll support it as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Bill 720, the Interagency Commission on Homelessness, Membership and Duties. The lead sponsors are Councilmembers Glass, Albernaz, and Rice. There is a public hearing that is scheduled for March the 17th at 1:30 in the afternoon. Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am proud to introduce this piece of legislation today in collaboration with members of the HHS committee. Because over the last year, I've been serving on the Interagency Commission on Homelessness, and those members, individuals and organizations, nonprofits, have been working very diligently to update our regulations regarding how we provide support services for individuals who are experiencing homelessness, making sure that it is rare, brief, and non-recurring. And I want to thank my predecessors on the council and in county government, particularly previous executive Ike Leggett and former council member George Leventhal, for the incredible work that they and colleagues who are still here on the dais put into this effort. It is their foundation that has set us up to be a leader in the entire nation with regard to how we handle our most unfortunate and those who need our support. And so what this legislation essentially does is build upon those efforts. You know, we've already reached functional zero with regard to our veteran homelessness, and we are nearing functional zero with regard to our chronic homelessness. So what this legislation does is it expands the scope so that we include families, which are primarily single mothers with children, and also expands it into seniors. And we would be, if this moves forward, the only jurisdiction in the entire country that provides specific support services for seniors who are experiencing homelessness. And so we know that homelessness knows no borders, especially being so close to Washington, D.C. and the D.C. region. There are people who will travel throughout our region seeking services that they know exist. And that is why we in the D.C. region have started coming together, working on this particular effort. Just last Friday, I was in the District of Columbia, not yet Douglas Commonwealth, but the District of Columbia with members of the Council of Governments Health and Human Services Committee, subcommittee, looking at a new facility that they just opened in Southwest Washington, mere blocks from the nation's capital. And so we know that this is a problem in the shadows of the nation's capital, and that's why the D.C. region has come together. And so, again, what this piece of legislation does is build on the incredible work that we've done here in Montgomery County and update it so that we can receive more support from HUD, from our federal partners, and from other stakeholders as well to keep doing the important work that needs to be done. And last thing I'll note, and it's an open invitation clear to my colleagues and for whomever is paying attention to this conversation, that on March 13th, the COG Health and Human Services Subcommittee will be coming to the Montgomery County Coalition for the Homeless's Seneca Heights facility. And so I'll be leading the tour of that important facility for our regional colleagues, regional leaders to come, and an open invitation for everybody to come see the important work that we're doing here in Montgomery County and to learn best practices. But again, we are a national leader in this effort, and this updated legislation, this legislation to update that work will be even more meaningful to the people that we're serving here in Montgomery County. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've been really impressed with the systemic approach that our county has taken to addressing the homeless needs here in Montgomery County, and I really want to commend Councilmember Glass and appreciate his willingness to step forward to be our lead on this critically important issue. The three members of the HHS committee and Councilmember Friedson participated in the point in time count last month, and it was an enlightening experience for me, to say the least. I have admired and seen the incredible work conducted by our Department of Health and Human Services and a number of our providers in the community. But when you're out at 3 o'clock in the morning, in the middle of the woods, when it's freezing cold, it really gives you a deep appreciation and understanding and empathy for just the tremendous struggle that county residents among us, many families, many children, are experiencing every day. So I proudly am a co-lead sponsor and appreciate Councilmember Glass's bringing this legislation to our attention. And in the next phase of this critically important work, our goal is to end family homelessness. And we have to acknowledge that this has to continue to be done in a systemic approach holistically with partners in the public, private, and nonprofit sector. So thank you, Councilmember Glass, for your leadership.
Thank you. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also want to thank Councilmember Glass for his leadership on issues relating to homelessness and vulnerable populations and the whole HHS committee. We've all had various points on this work, and it's such a huge issue, but you're right, we've had such a systemic and good approach. We just had a joint committee briefing on the next steps and bold steps that our HHS department and our preventing and ending homelessness department are going to take to eliminate homelessness, hopefully in the next, effectively eliminate homelessness effectively in the next several years, and also address racial disparities in homelessness, which we know our African-American population is much more likely to be homeless, and that's a national trend, unfortunately, but we're tackling it head on. So I just want to thank my colleagues and be added as a co-sponsor to the bill.
Thank you. Councilmember Rice.
Well, it's actually Councilmember Obama.
Please.
Thank you. I feel like something that a lot of people don't realize is how much homelessness affects kids as well. I'm on the leadership council for my school's Minority Scholars Program, and they recently hosted a JAG sleep out where they had students sleep in the courtyard to represent homelessness and raise awareness for homelessness that affects some Northwest students as well. The thing about Northwest is that it's very diverse. I feel like a good representation of our county, and we have people who are all the way on one end of the spectrum in terms of income, and people who are all the way on the other, including approximately 10 or 11 homeless people. And so I believe this bill is so important, and I support it.
Thank you. Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you for those thoughtful comments and that contribution to the discussion. Really appreciate Councilmember Glass for continuing to follow through in his role as lead for homelessness. He's doing exactly what the county needs, which is to stay on top of this and shepherd and organize and put forward, a constant stream of initiatives to help us strive and move forward. And I just wanted to add, part of the problem. Services are a big part of the solution. A lot of the problem comes from the housing shortage that we have. Homelessness is a lack of a home. And so we have a real obligation as part of our homelessness policy response to both increase funding for affordable housing and also take steps to promote market-based housing. When you look at the country, what you see is that communities that have the biggest housing shortages have the highest homelessness population. Those two things are profoundly correlated. And our housing market in this county is not healthy. It's producing about half of the historic housing supply that it produced annually. And that is really a problem. So we need to do more to change the market dynamics so that the private sector can produce the housing that we need to produce so that we don't become a community like those you see on the West Coast or other places where the housing shortage grows and grows to the point where you have many, many thousands of people who are homeless. And we will be swimming upstream. All of our efforts to provide services to help people bounce back and find housing, all of that it's swimming upstream when you have an overall housing market that's not healthy. So I'm certainly working on housing initiatives, and I encourage my colleagues as well. We need to really recognize that providing services is an essential ingredient. It's the one thing that we can most directly do right now, but addressing the overall housing problem is an essential component as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President. No, Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to be added as a co-sponsor and really do appreciate Councilmember Glass's work on this. This is a very important modification to to the membership, and I think it's really going to be a positive moving forward. I think it's important for all of us to work together on housing initiatives. We can't do it as a lonely council member because this is such a huge undertaking, and I think that all of these things come into place. All of these things play a role. Every single thing matters, and so I appreciate the fact that you're continuing to lead the charge as the previous councils have done, and you mentioned Councilmember Leventhal, who did a really good job, and I know as council president my job was also to figure out where everybody wanted to be in terms of which positions and which things to lead, and I'm so glad that you stepped up to this particular role because we needed somebody that would come in with the same passion and the same commitment as Councilmember Leventhal had. So thank you so much again for this great bill.
Thank you. Councilmember Hawker.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was going to say the same thing. Councilmember Leventhal left big shoes to fill. I'm really glad you've stepped into this. I want to add my thanks as well. I like the language here. It was definitely due for an update and update of the goals as well. And I'm grateful for your leadership, and I want to be added as a co-sponsor as well.
Thank you. And I, too, want to congratulate Councilmember Glass, and I'd like to be added as a co-sponsor. Councilmember Friedson.
Yep, just wanted to add my echoes to the chorus, thanking Councilmember Glass for his leadership, appreciating all the work that has been done prior to this council and on this council, and I would like to be added as a co-sponsor as well.
Thank you. Councilmember Reamer.
Thanks. I need to be a co-sponsor as well. I thought I was. My mistake. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, no other lights. Next, we have calls for of bills for final reading. The first is Bill 2419, Landlord-Tenant Relations, Obligations of a Landlord, Air Conditioning. The Fed Committee has made a recommendation. We're going to hear from the Fed Committee Chair.
Thank you. All right. Glad we are returning to this so we can successfully vote on this important legislation. Really want to express appreciation to Councilmember Hucker, who drafted the proposal and brought it to us. This is really addressing an important gap in our policy towards rental housing, which is requiring that rental housing be comfortable not only, or I should say be safe, not only in the winter but in the summer. And so the air conditioning requirement, we've previously taken it up at the council, and the committee recommendation, a large part of it was based upon recommendation from the executive branch, which after 6 months of deliberation changed the morning of the council's day to discuss the bill. So based on new recommendations from the executive branch, we went back to consider alternatives. Councilmember Hucker is going to present amendments, and I'll just say we didn't, since it was before the body, we didn't feel it was needed to go back to committee, but that rather it could just remain before the body. And I certainly will support the amendments that Councilmember Hucker will offer today. I just want to say, in terms of the policy issue, it was a little bit of a challenge because we understand that many people don't use a lot of air conditioning because of their need for affordability. And it is a decision that people make about how much heat or how much cooling they're going to use. And by instituting a mandate, I think I have to accept that this will change the cost equation a bit because these costs will be passed on. But I was compelled by comments that we received. Councilmember Jawando and I had a chance to talk with a housing code inspector who expressed to us that one of the problems is that many tenants might think that they're making a rational decision to use less air conditioning or not use air conditioning, but then what happens in that case is you can get other problems like mold in your unit, and there's no easy way around this challenge. And so ensuring that the housing is dry in a climate where we can at times get really intense moisture is actually an important protection or safeguard, and you only can really do that with cooling. So recognizing that there's no free lunch here, that these costs will be passed on to some extent. Nevertheless, we felt that it was important to have the requirement, and then we'll work on it from there. So again, with that, I will turn it to Councilmember Hucker to the Council President. I presume we'll turn it to Councilmember Hucker to describe his amendments, and I'll be happy to support them.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Chairman. I'm really glad we're here today to finish this up. We all know what this bill does and why we're here. We are taking many pains to fight climate change, but we have to, while we're doing that, take pains to keep all our residents safe, especially our 300,000 renters in rental housing, and to keep the requirements regarding our built environment in place to do that. And we've had a requirement for heat for a very, very long time because it really is a life or death issue if people don't have heat. And air conditioning has become a life or death issue as well, not just a comfort issue. So I really appreciate the work of the Fed Committee in going through this bill in detail. Appreciate the work of the DHCA and Mr. Nagan and your team and all the stakeholders that have been in touch with us about this. This didn't come from a manual of recommended policy. This came from the real life experience of tenants and housing inspectors and others that had approached us because they were in danger in their rental housing in Montgomery County. And this bill, I think, is going to address that in a very responsible way. So the amendments, I think, are before you. It should say draft 5 at the top of the sheet you have. Amendment 1 simply amends line 10, draft 5 of the bill, in order that detached single-family homes are excluded from the air conditioning requirement, but attached single-family homes, aka townhomes, are brought under the requirements of the bill. That reflects the experience we've had. The tenants that have approached me, at least, that have not had working air conditioning have been in, besides the ones in apartments, have been in townhomes and have not been in single-family homes. And certainly townhomes, the way they're structured, probably have fewer windows to open and shut and other limitations. For purposes, so lines 7 to 12, as you can see on the draft, would read, for purposes of this subsection, rental housing has the meaning stated in section 29.1, except that rental housing does not include a detached single-family home or a dwelling unit located on a site listed in the National Register of Historic Places. We can adopt these together, right, Mr. President? Okay. Yep. Amendment 2 replaces the Fed Committee's opt-out amendment, which we had some concerns about was potentially overly broad and subject to mischief by landlords who might want to urge or coerce or compel their tenants into signing away their right to air conditioning. After conversations with the county executive and the chair and the DHCA director, I've suggested a more targeted approach that says a landlord may apply for and the director may grant an extension of up to 6 months to comply with the requirements of this section if the director finds that A, the landlord must make electrical upgrades to the rental housing to comply with the requirements, and B, making the upgrades would cause financial hardship to the landlords. We were not only concerned about the cost of a window unit, which isn't that much, but it's the more expensive electric upgrades that may be necessary in some of our older rental properties. And then Amendment 3, financing, the executive must, subject to appropriation applicable law, explore options to offer low-interest financing to landlords who need to upgrade their electric systems to comply with the requirements of this act. There's a lot of commercial financing available, as you all know. I've also spoken to the president of the Green Bank, who is happy to help landlords access low-interest financing that's also more energy efficient, like any generation of new air conditioning would be. So with that, Mr. President, I move the 3 amendments.
Thank you. And who was the second? You were. And Councilmember Reamer was the second. So we still have people. Do the people whose lights are on want to discuss the amendments as well, or do you want to just... You do. Yes. Councilmember Jawando, please.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I want to thank Vice President Hucker for putting this bill forward, and Chairman Reamer and my colleagues for the robust discussion. I think, I plan to, I won't hide the ball here, I plan to support the amendments. But I do think it's worth noting that while I'm glad this takes a lot of steps forward to recognize that this is a public health issue, and I've said that from day one, if heating's a public health issue, cooling's a public health issue, and we need to treat this bill like that and accept any cost associated with it, but this does a good job of mitigating it. I still remain concerned about the single-family homes. And again, I'm going to support it, but while we might not have a lot of cases, there are a lot of people in single-family homes and that are older, that may not have access to air conditioning. And I think if you're in the marketplace, if you're renting your home, you're a business, you're a small business, you should be required to provide safe and habitable housing, and which should, like we're saying in this bill, include air conditioning. So I will acknowledge there are other ways with fans and other things in homes to maybe cool them, but it's getting hotter. We know which direction we're heading. We haven't had a snow this winter yet, and so I just think we might have to revisit this, but this is certainly progress. I plan to support the amendments, but I just couldn't in good conscience not bring that up, because I think there's a lot of people that will be exempted from this that are going to need these protections. So I think I'd like to ask, and I know Director Nagam is here, that you, sir, would monitor that situation. And I know Miss Rosie McCrae Mills is here as well. I know I butchered your name. I'm sorry, Miss Rosie. But if you could seriously, as we are monitoring complaints and as this law is being rolled out and people are understanding what's required, that we look into the single-family home issue to see if that's a problem and we might need to revisit it. But I appreciate Councilmember Hucker and all my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you to Council Vice President Hucker, for putting forward the bill. And I really do appreciate sincerely the robust discussions that you and I have had about this legislation and the challenge of balancing the cost of housing with the health issues related to housing. And it's not an easy balance to strike, because the costs associated with changes to housing, improvements to housing, get passed on to the people who live in those houses. And as somebody who's been really focused on the affordability or lack thereof of housing that's available in Montgomery County, I raised a number of concerns during the significant discussions that we had at the Fed committee, and I think that these amendments, which I do really appreciate, strike that appropriate balance, and I think I really do appreciate the way in which you presented them forward. I think that this got a little chaotic there at the end. I think we could have had better communication from the executive branch and a more consistent approach to what that position was. But I think ultimately, notwithstanding a couple hiccups here along the way, we're arriving at a thoughtful, deliberative conclusion, and I will be supporting this amendment, and I will be supporting the bill.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do want to thank our Council Vice President for his leadership on this. So in July, Councilmember Jawando, Reamer, and Hucker and I participated in a walkthrough of some garden apartments in the Long Branch area. And it was a hot day. And it was actually like walking down memory lane for Councilmember Jawando, who had grown up just around the block of the garden apartments that we were visiting. And as we walked through some of the garden apartments, there was a gentleman in a wheelchair who had 4 grandchildren that he was taking care of that particular week. And his apartment unit had no air conditioning. And it was stifling. You could sense it. And it wasn't just the heat. The garbage that was right next door, because of the heat and the smell of that garbage, was compounded by the lack of air conditioning that was happening within that specific unit. And so that is who this legislation is for. Residents who are in extraordinarily vulnerable positions, who are not in a position to be able to afford a living accommodation that meets their most basic needs. And so I proudly support this bill, appreciate the amendments to help strike a balance between meeting those needs, but also ensuring that this is a reasonable bill moving forward, and so that we can collectively support it. So I'm proud to be co-sponsor of this and really appreciate that we're at this point. So thank you very much, Council Vice President Hucker.
Thank you very much, Council Vice President Hucker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to follow up quickly, thank you, Councilmember Joando, for your comments and for your ongoing support of the bill, and Councilmember Friedson for your comments as well. Just to follow up, I agree, obviously, with the principle that we need to keep everybody in safe housing. Everybody agrees with that, and that this is part of that, and everybody deserves air conditioning. You write legislation in real time based on the problems as you know they exist, and not necessarily problems you think may exist. And, you know, we will be here. So if we are approached by tenants in single-family homes who lack air conditioning, they should contact us, and they should contact DHCA, and we should monitor that situation. You're right, and we should come back and amend the bill if we need to. Tenants also right now should be asking for air conditioning and make sure air conditioning is in their leases, because if it's in the lease, DHCA can enforce the lease and make sure that the air conditioning is working. If it's not in the lease, if the landlord hasn't offered that and the tenant hasn't requested it, they don't have much to do, and we'll have to be back here revisiting the bill. But I think this is appropriate for the problem as we have known, has scoped it now based on the research we've been able to do, and it may not address every problem that comes up in the future, but I think this is a big step forward. I felt like I had another point, but I don't know what it was. So anyway, that's where we are. I appreciate everybody's support and comments.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank Vice President Hucker for this legislation, and the Fed Committee in particular for the months of negotiation. There were a lot of different factors to weave in and to take account of, but I just want to take a minute or two to share my personal story. You know, I grew up in a Levitt home on Long Island, New York, and for those of you who are unfamiliar, Levitt Homes, Levitt Town, the original suburb. And so it was my single mother and I who lived in our home, 1.5 bathrooms. And yeah, there were some air conditioning units in the wall units. But those air conditioning units weren't used very often because it was expensive. And so when it got really hot, and I mean it had to have gotten really hot for us to turn on our air conditioning, particularly in my bedroom, it would be turned on about 30 minutes before I'd go to bed. And the minute I would hit the bed, the air conditioning unit would be turned off. And it was just enough to cool me down so that I could get a good night's sleep. And so I understand why this legislation is important, and I am supporting it, but I think it's important for me to share my story, because just because people have air conditioning units doesn't mean they're going to use them. And so there are some concerns I have with regard to the additional costs that either the renter might incur or the homeowner might incur. But I do know that our climate is changing, and that the heat that is being experienced by all of us is real, and it's dangerous. And so that is why I'm supporting this legislation. But it's also important to keep in mind that this legislation is not a panacea, particularly for the issue at heart here, which is climate change. And it is a sign that we need to redouble our efforts to reverse the course that our planet is on, the destructive course that our planet is on, and to make sure that we do everything we can to make our planet as inhabitable and hospitable for as long as we can. And so again, I want to thank everybody who took a lot of time to make this legislation, to put this piece of legislation where it is, but we still have more work to do, and the thoughtfulness that the lead sponsor, Vice President Hucker, has put into it, and collaborating with a lot of different agencies and departments, I think is important, because I would like to follow up with them to see how this moves forward. But again, putting more air conditioning units in people's homes doesn't necessarily mean that they will use them. And so I end on that thought, but again, I appreciate the work that's been going on towards this legislation.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Rice.
It's actually Councilmember Ivana.
Thank you. I agree. I have a similar story when it comes to air conditioning in apartment units. I live in an apartment, and I know what it's like to forgo the air conditioning when it's too hot because of the cost, and also when it's too cold. And we've had our air conditioning broken before in the winter, so I know what that's like as well. I agree that not just because you have them doesn't mean you'll use it, but I think it should be mandatory that all tenants have access to air conditioning. And as mentioned earlier, it could be the difference between life and death at times. And also climate change. As a young person on this planet, it's no secret that the earth is dying, and if I want, or our generation wants a future on this planet, we've got to fight for it. And so that's kind of what I've been doing with my company. I don't know if you've heard of Junior Achievement, but they have a company program, and I'm the CEO of my local one, Pouchful, and we're selling lunch bags to combat paper waste and really fight against environmental waste and just raise concern in general for environmental concerns. So thank you for bringing that up. And I agree that apartment tenants should have fair terms with their landlords. I know we've had our fair share of up and downs with our landlord, and so I believe this bill is really important, and I support it as well.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Weaver.
Thank you for those comments. Again, just providing some real human context for our policy conversation. It's really useful, and it reminds me, as Councilmember Albornoz relayed the story of our walk that evening in Long Branch, and it was a really powerful experience. And I remember, I think it may have been the granddaughters of the grandfather you mentioned, and they said that in the summer they would like to be able to sleep with the window open in their bedroom, and they can't because the garbage is right outside 2 stories down, and it rises up and it fills their bedroom with an intolerable smell. And so they have to sleep in the hallway, which is even hotter because it's a smaller space. That's the circumstance that is presently experienced by kids in our schools and families in our community. So again, I want to thank Councilmember Hucker for bringing this forward, and I'm really pleased to support it.
Thank you. Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you, Councilmember Hucker, and also Fed Committee for this work. I think that for me, one of the interesting pieces of this whole entire thing is that I don't think people in Montgomery County realize that these issues exist. That not only this particular component, but so many other challenges that so many people in our community face. So it is very important to maintain that connection to the community, to understand what's going on, but also I think to time and time again educate not only all of the residents, but then also all the elected leadership on many of these very specific real stories that are happening. And this is one particular component, very important one. And so I'm really glad to support this, and I hope that again we continue to shine a spotlight on so many members of our community that are struggling day in and day out with basic issues that many people just don't ever even imagine folks are dealing with in our county.
Thank you. Vice President Hucker.
I'd be remiss if I didn't thank our great legislative attorney, Christine Wellens, for a lot of work on this. Thank you very much, Christine.
Thank you. We are going to vote on the amendments first. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of the amendments, please raise your hand, and that passes unanimously. And next, I guess it's a roll call vote for the actual motion itself.
Mr. Glass?
Yes.
Mr. Glass votes yes. Mr. Jawando?
Yes.
Mr. Jawando votes yes. Mr. Reamer?
Yes.
Mr. Reamer votes yes. Ms. Navarro?
Yes.
Ms. Navarro votes yes. Mr. Albornoz?
Yes.
Mr. Albornoz votes yes. Mr. Rice?
Yes.
Mr. Rice votes yes. Mr. Friedson?
Yes.
Mr. Friedson votes yes. Mr. Hucker?
Yes.
Mr. Hucker votes yes. Mr. Katz?
Yes. So that carries unanimously. And thank you. Next is Bill 3919, Contracts and Procurement, Local Small Business Reserve Program. The GO Committee recommends enactment with amendments, and we're going to hear from the GO Committee Chair.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I think this is another one of those examples of our economic development platform coming to life. So this particular bill was introduced on December 3rd, 2019, and it came. It's a bill that I believe also reflects some recommendations in our OLO report 2019-19 on changes to the Small Business Reserve Program. The lead sponsor is Councilmember Juando, with co-sponsors Councilmember Rice Navarro, Reamer, Albornoz, Glass, Hucker, and Katz. We had a public hearing on January 14th, and everyone spoke in favor of this particular bill. Procurement Director Aschetti voiced the executive support of the bill, and he noted that 95% of the resident businesses in the county are small businesses, and that expanding opportunities for these businesses supports our local economy. He also noted that the LSBRP has exceeded its 20% goal in recent years, and that it would be beneficial to small businesses and the local economy to increase the goal to 25% under the bill. We also had some small businesses and nonprofits that testified in support, and specifically we had nonprofits that expressed support of the bill because they believe that they support the local economy through the purchase of goods and services and job creation. Nonprofit Montgomery noted that over 13% of private sector employees in the county work for nonprofits, and in addition, CASA noted that nonprofits help small businesses in creating other small businesses. For example, they've said that they have helped at least 22 immigrant and Latino entrepreneurs start small businesses in the county. So we on the GO committee recommended adoption of the bill 3-0 with clarifying amendments, and Ms. Christine Willens was really wonderful in preparing a very important, good packet for us. Basically, let me talk about what the bill does. It amends the Small Business Reserve Program to, number one, permit the participation of nonprofit organizations in the program. Number two, increase the minimum percentage of contracts that must be awarded to small businesses. And number three, establish a goal to award certain direct purchases to local small businesses. And finally, alter reporting requirements. The bill would alter the definition of a local small business to include any nonprofit business or nonprofit entity that, number one, has its principal place of business or operations in the county. Two, in the case of a for-profit business, is independently owned and operated. And three, is not a subsidiary of any other business entity. Four, meets the criteria size limits and gross sales amounts established by Method 2 regulations. Also, it includes increasing from 20 to 25% the amount of procurement as an agency must award to local small businesses, and require an agency to establish a goal to award 50% of its direct purchases. And for example, certain purchases of $10,000 or less to local small businesses, and to report to the Office of Procurement regarding those direct purchases. Finally, the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee did adopt some clarifying amendments. One, to ensure that the statutory definition of direct purchase aligns with the regulatory definition of direct purchase. And two, clarifying that a direct purchase may be counted both towards an agency's 25% LSBRP mandate and towards its 50% goal to award direct purchases to certified small businesses. I believe, I don't know, Ms. Wellens, if there was anything else that needed to be reported.
I don't believe so.
Everything?
Councilmember Navarro, I think you covered it very thoroughly. Thank you.
So I want to thank my colleagues, Councilmember Friedson and Council President Katz, for their work, and of course, Councilmember Juando for putting this forth as a very important piece of legislation.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Juando.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you to the chair of the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee and my friend, Councilmember Navarro, for your thoughtful deliberation, and Councilmember Friedson and Councilmember Katz for your work on the committee, and all the co-sponsors for your support. I also would be remiss if I didn't thank Ash Shetty, who's the Director of Procurement, who's hiding behind there, and Grace Dano, and the whole team over there at Procurement that was very helpful with knowledge and gathering information to get us to this point. And also the work of our Office of Legislative Oversight, as was mentioned, who did a great report and pointed out some of the things that we were able to then incorporate into this bill. And of course, Christine Wellens, for your work on this. Thank you so much, the attorney who helped to draft this bill. I talked about, and Councilman Navarro laid out the bill, so I don't need to do that. I can scratch that part of my remarks now. But I've talked about a lot. My parents are both small business owners, my mom, my stepdad, and I helped them start their businesses, and it can be really daunting when you're doing that and getting your foot in the door and knowing how to access government procurement. And now under this bill, a goal for direct purchases, smaller purchases under $10,000 that are done by county government, and there's millions of dollars of those purchases, can be a way to get you a foothold and get into the door and start providing your goods or services and grow your business, which we all want. And that's the Local Small Business Reserve Program is a really great program and stepping stone for folks who are trying to expand and help grow our economy. I'm really excited that we are, for the first time, going to include nonprofits and recognize the great work that they do. Again, 13% of our economy and workforce, providing many, many services. And I've always said a good nonprofit business is a business. And they are providing services, and we should, in our job in government procurement is spending government dollars for the public benefit. That's what nonprofits do. And so we should certainly allow them to compete and access procurement dollars. And I'm also very excited and eager to see the data working with procurement around these direct purchases. Again, these are purchases that are across county government that are $10,000 or less, needed to allow us to move quickly and procure goods and services, but setting a goal that 50% of those should come from our local small businesses. I think in having a report to see how each agency is doing, that will give us great data to see if there's other things we need to do. If we're having catering a dinner, or we're getting a consultant, many consultants in this area who provide a range of technical expertise on a whole range of issues, we should be looking within to support those folks. Those are just two examples. And so I think these $10,000 or less procurement contracts or direct purchases and creating some sunshine around how we're spending that hundreds of millions of dollars of those purchases, which it is. It's more than people think. And so the goal of legislation is to open up more opportunities for our local small businesses and our nonprofit businesses in Montgomery County. And I thank all the previous work and previous councils who put this program in place. And I'm really, really excited. We're going to raise the floor from 20 to 25% of our procurement to go to local small businesses. We've been heading in the right direction, but as you know, when you raise the floor, the expectation is that we can keep going higher. And so with over $1 billion in procurement, there's a lot of room to grow. So I want to thank my colleagues, and I think this will be a great incentive for our local small businesses and nonprofits to grow and create other people who have entrepreneurial ideas to step into the marketplace. So I thank everyone for the support.
Thank you. Councilmember Rice.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you, Councilmember Jawando, for your great work on this. This is something that, we've been trying to wrap our heads around for a very long time. I really want to thank Ash Shetty for his continued support in his new role and really starting to make some changes in procurement that I think are going to make a difference for our local businesses here in Montgomery County. When I first came to the council, I was quite dismayed that surrounding jurisdictions have local preference policies that we don't have. And certainly they are supporting their local businesses and we aren't. And so from that perspective, I think there's even more that we can do beyond this. I think this is, as Councilmember Jawando said, a first step for us when it comes to really helping to support our local businesses here and expanding that opportunity to our nonprofits, recognizing that they are small businesses themselves and play a tremendous role in terms of service delivery in our community, but also as a core component of economic development in our community as well, is just incredibly important. So really want to thank you. There's a lot more work to be done, certainly when it comes to our minority business representation. It's a part of our small business cohort that we still fall woefully short. I'm still waiting for the county executive to put forth another disparity study because we are certain to find that we still have not moved the needle as far as we need to go. Just had a meeting with 4 business owners that are all here local in Montgomery County, that are small business owners, all minority owned, and they continue to struggle to actually get contracts here in Montgomery County. And so from that perspective, I think this is the first step that we need to do, but there's so much more that needs to be done to truly level the playing field. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just got a text from my mom to prove people are watching at home. She told me to sit up straight when I speak.
That's really good, Mom.
I'm happy it was your mom and not mine.
I was going to say, yeah.
Noted for all of us.
That's right. That's right. So I want to thank Councilmember Jawando and the GO Committee for their excellent work on this very important bill. The first 8 years of my professional career were spent in the nonprofit sector, and so I can confirm, as many of us on this dais can in the first person, that these are small businesses. And one of the things that really struck me from the testimony in support of this bill was that it had support from the business community. Our chambers came out very much in support of this legislation, which further underscores the respect that our nonprofit sector has across our region, and especially here in Montgomery County. This is a common sense bill, and I do really want to acknowledge Mr. Shetty for his leadership. I know he's working on a lot of reform in this space. This is just another example of that, and I was proud to support this bill and proud to support our nonprofit sector. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Jawando.
As I sit up straight, I just wanted to thank all my colleagues and thank Councilmember Rice for mentioning the important connection. Not only are 90% plus or 95% of our businesses under 50 people, and including our nonprofit community that we're adding, many of those are businesses of color, and this, while it doesn't call it out directly, certainly is in mind, and we have much more work to do once we get this disparity study to make sure that our communities of color, the fastest growing small business and entrepreneurs in our community, have access to capital and can continue to provide great service and access procurement. So I'm really appreciative that you mentioned that point, and again, thank all my colleagues.
Thank you. Councilmember Rice.
Well, it's actually Councilmember Yvonne.
Thank you. This is another amazing bill that I am in support of because I'm also an aspiring entrepreneur. In addition to Pouchful, I'm looking to launch my second business venture, which will have to start out as a small business. And when I was looking into research for how to bring this project to life for an expo, I was looking on the local county website for resources and the Maryland Women's Business Committee and things like that. So I think this bill would help people like me. And I feel like the entrepreneurial movement is big. I feel like everybody knows that as long as they have a talent, they can market it, and this bill would help them do that.
Thank you.
Got to get you registered in the program tomorrow. So Ash, let's get her signed up.
Thank you, and this is a roll call vote.
Mr. Glass?
Yes.
Mr. Glass votes yes. Mr. Jawando?
Yes.
Mr. Jawando votes yes. Mr. Reamer?
Yes.
Mr. Reamer votes yes. Ms. Navarro?
Yes.
Ms. Navarro votes yes. Mr. Albornoz?
Yes.
Mr. Albornoz votes yes. Mr. Rice?
Yes.
Mr. Rice votes yes. Mr. Friedson?
Yes.
Mr. Friedson votes yes. Mr. Hucker?
Yes.
Mr. Hucker votes yes. Mr. Katz?
Yes, and that carries unanimously. And we're going to go to our next bill, but I did want to point out that we are pleased to have Board of Education member Carly Silvestri here today. And I don't know that we pointed out that earlier we had Board of Education member Jeanette Dixon here as well. The next bill that we're going to be discussing is the canopy fees exemptions, and the T&E committee recommends enactment with amendments, and we're going to ask the T&E chair to please explain that to us.
I was afraid you might ask. Just kidding. This bill will help our public use airports be exempt from the tree canopy law when they expand to remove the trees that they need to do to keep people safe. So, Mr. Zions, can you walk us through the amendments?
Certainly, the council member Rice noted the conflict between airplanes and trees. Yes. And yet we charge people for removing trees or or land disturbances in an area where trees could grow by acreage. Right now, existing law exempts one airport. We have two airports. This bill would retain the full exemption for that existing airport, which is the air park, and would exempt Davis Airport from fees only. That explains the amendments that the committee proposed to do that. That was within the scope of advertisement.
So, move the amended bill.
Thank you. Councilmember Rice.
Well, I want to thank the T&E committee. I also want to thank staff. Mr. Zients, you've been amazing in terms of really getting us to where we need to be. Look, this is about fair and equitable treatment of our air parks, again, as we talk about businesses in the community. And I encourage folks to go out and visit Davis Air Park. A lot of people may know about our Montgomery County Air Park that's located in Montgomery Village, but there's some great and innovative work that's going on there. There's also talk of some great partnerships between our Montgomery County Public Schools and Davis Airport when it comes to drone technology and the specialized drone program that we're looking to bring to fruition here in Montgomery County. And so as everybody hears about us talking about the future of drone technology when it comes to Amazon package delivery and but also with military uses and also when it comes to surveying. A lot of our farmers now use drone technology to actually survey their land. A lot of our land surveyors, real estate agents are using drone technology. These are all incredibly important. And so having a facility that's able to do that and really foster that for our community and continue to keep us on the forefront of innovation and technology is incredibly important. And so I really want to thank the great work of the committee in supporting this. This is going to make a tremendous difference when it comes to the future of our air park.
Thank you very much. Councilmember, go ahead.
Can I just note two things in the bill? This has a retroactive effective date. There is a cost to this. Within the 2017 effective date, there have been $69,250 worth of fees collected. They would be refunded under this bill.
Good. Thank you. Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to add a thought that we had discussed at committee regarding this piece of legislation. And what this aims to do also is level the playing field and to remove inequities that actually exist, whereby the public and quasi-public air parks don't have to pay these fees, but our private ones do. And that's not fair. And so I appreciate Councilmember Rice for introducing this to help level the playing field.
Thank you, and this is a roll call vote as well.
Mr. Glass?
Yes.
Mr. Glass votes yes. Mr. Jawando?
Yes.
Mr. Jawando votes yes. Mr. Reamer? Mr. Reamer votes yes. Ms. Navarro?
Yes.
Ms. Navarro votes yes. Mr. Albornoz?
Yes.
Mr. Albornoz votes yes. Mr. Rice?
Yes.
Mr. Rice votes yes. Mr. Friedson?
Yes.
Mr. Friedson votes yes. Mr. Hucker?
Yes.
Mr. Hucker votes yes. Mr. Katz?
Yes, so that carries unanimously. The next item that we thank you. The next item that we have is a briefing on the 2020 census. Well, did you want to speak now?
Yeah, since I requested it.
As we're getting started, Councilmember Navarro.
Well, once they get settled.
We'd like to begin, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I really appreciate the team that is here today to make this presentation and to update us. Of course, all of us have been very focused on this very important event that is going to take place shortly, the Census 2020, and the particular impact and importance that this has in our county. Even, I think, this morning, it is evident as we have discussed different bills and if we have discussed different issues that we know that in Montgomery County we have a lot of communities that traditionally are undercounted. And that has very, very serious impact in how we do our work, because it means that we're missing out on really important resources. And also, it means that we are missing out on important issues like representation. There have been a lot of different meetings, discussions. The Council of Governments have had discussions about this on a regional basis. I serve on the board of directors, and it was really, really impressed with what the District of Columbia, what Prince George's County, what Northern Virginia has done thus far. And also have participated in different events with Casa de Maryland as they went out to canvass and try to make sure that communities that are usually underrepresented have an opportunity to learn about this, and also very excited about what the efforts thus far have been right here in Montgomery County. And as I said earlier, we just introduced the special appropriation request because we need the resources to get the word out. And it's going to take everybody working together. So I requested this briefing because I think it's really critical that all of us understand where we are, understand what has been done thus far, and also where there may be additional opportunities for everybody to hold hands and get out there and make sure that everybody participates. So with that, I turn it over to Council President.
Go ahead, please. Who's going to lead it off? Carolyn, are you leading it off? Please begin.
Hi, everybody. This is Carolyn. I am a legislative financialist for the Montgomery County Council, and welcome to the Government Census 2020 party. We have lots to cover today, so if we can ask everyone to hold their questions or email afterwards. This is not the only time you'll be meeting the census team. We will have a progress update during budget as well as a GEO session on March 5th to discuss the state and county funding budget, and we will also have a preliminary result progress update in the fall. Just to highlight we have a full force out here today, and I just want to thank everybody for coming out and making the time. I know it was very difficult. We have the U.S. Census Bureau, we have Community Engagement Cluster, every single member, the liaisons and the regional service directors. We have Office of Community Partnerships, our census manager, Sean. We have Montgomery County Public Libraries, Montgomery College, Montgomery County Public Schools, Montgomery Planning, the Maryland Latino Census Coalition, and we have not, we'd be remiss not to include the nonprofit partners, the dozens that are helping us through the outreach and the businesses as well. We'll start as soon as we get the presentation going. I can do this. Yeah. Got it. And if we could take 30 seconds at the end of this briefing to just do a group picture in the front with the census team, that would be wonderful. Thanks. Go ahead, Diane.
Thank you. As we begin this, I just wanted to make a note for the agenda change. After this, we're supposed to be interviewing Mike Covio, who is the County Executive Appointee as Director of Department of Finance. We're going to move that to after our public hearings at 1:30, and then we're going to have a proposed closed session. We're going to then we're going to have to move back our committee meetings, which were supposed to start at 2:30. They'll probably be around 3:30, 3:15, 3:30, something like that. Okay, please begin.
Good morning. Good morning, Council President Sidney Katz, Council Vice President Tom Hooker, Complete Count Committee Chair Nancy Navarro, and members of the County Council. Thank you so much for having us here for this very important briefing. I've had individual conversations with you informally, but we are happy to be here today to give you a formal update on our progress and also to talk about our efforts and the census outreach in the county. So we are about to provide you with a lot of information today, but the one takeaway for you and for everyone watching at home is this. The 2020 census is safe, confidential, it's easy, and important. We also want folks to know that everyone counts. So everyone counts in Montgomery County. Everyone in the household counts, whether you have status or not. No matter where you came from, everyone counts, and everyone in your household counts. This is not a partisan issue, although some would like to make this a partisan issue. And so, again, the message here is no matter what language you speak, whether or not you have status, what country you come from, or how many people are in your household, every single person in Montgomery County counts. So before we get into our specific efforts, I think it's important to start with a baseline of census information. So at this point, I would like to introduce the Census Bureau's partnership specialist, Asha Dante Kemp, who has been all over the community with us, and we're very grateful for our partnership with the Census Bureau.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to say we could not do what we're doing for the Census Bureau without Montgomery County. They have been a huge support. Secondly, I am battling a cold, so hopefully my voice carries out throughout this briefing. The primary thing that we want to let everyone know is that our goal is to count everyone once, only once, and in the right place. As Diane mentioned, it is very important that regardless of your status that you are counted within the census. This brings funds to the community and also make sure you have the resources that you need. So what's new? We have a lot going on. We're really focused on our initiatives. Some of our primary focuses right now is statistics in schools. We are really trying to get Montgomery County schools and statewide schools involved in the census. Children under 5 are always and historically excuse me, the lowest count. And so we really want to make sure that we are engaging the schools and get the support of the education entities here, whether it is a daycare facility, a special education facility, or just our local schools, colleges, get them all involved. So however you guys can support that effort, we really would appreciate it. Secondly, the other initiative that we are strongly working on is group quarter still, ensuring that we know how to count the homeless, which I know is important to all of you as well. We want to make sure that we know where the soup kitchens, shelters, homeless that are living on the street, where to locate them so we can count and include them as well. They are important and they need the resources that come from the $675 billion that the 2020 census will excuse me, distribute over the next 10 years. So we want to ensure that those are the focuses that we have moving forward. But just to give you a little information about the census, so this Go Around 2020 census, for the first time, people will be able to respond in 3 different ways, which is online, by phone, and paper form, which is the traditional method. Mid-March, they will start receiving invitations, and these invitations will be sent to homes, not individuals, but they will have geocodes which identifies your home location. People can then go online, enter that geocode or their address if they don't have it for some reason, and respond to the census. The initial invitations will begin being sent out on March 16th, so we're estimating that most households should receive it between the 16th and the 20th of March. April 1st, of course, is Census Day. We are hoping that everyone really rallies, gets online, and complete the census on that day, or pick up the phone. We will have the census available in 12 languages. But in case you don't speak one of those 12 languages online, we also will have instruction manuals in 59 languages to help guide you through the process. So we are really trying to be inclusive and make sure no one's left out. Excuse me. What we're asking is for partners, as far as businesses, organizations, faith-based entities, and local federal government to get involved, support, and nonprofits, to get involved and support and encourage their constituents, their employees, thank you, their employees, and also their customers to participate in the census. Great things are going on here in the county. People are doing lockdowns with the job and allowing an hour so that they can complete the census. We're finding different ways of hosting parties and throwing events to assist as well. So just think creatively of how you can support the census. Let us know how we can help, and we will be happy to do so.
Great. Thank you, Asha, for that overview. Again, we really appreciate the Census Bureau's partnership with us and being at almost every single event with us. There are other partnership specialists that we've been working with outside of ASHA. So thank you again for the Census Bureau for your work there. So our office led the work in 2010, and in 2010 our response rate was 80%. We had one of the highest response rates in the region and also nationwide. And so because of that, once again, our office is leading the census outreach efforts this year. So what's at stake for Montgomery County? There is funding. The federal government allocates more than $675 billion in funding every year based on census data. Here in the state of Maryland, it's estimated that Marylanders, for every Marylander that is not counted, we will lose $18,250 for every person that is not counted over 10 years. Now, if the response rate is 80% and the population in Montgomery County is at 1.1 million, you can just do the math on those numbers over 10 years and how important that funding piece is. Also, redistricting. Would not only redistricting of legislative districts, but also school districts. That's been a very big topic in our community, and voting precincts as well. I also want to stress here that not only is it the direct funding resources that is important, it's also the indirect allocation of resources. So as you know, we use census data in almost every facet of our jobs daily, right? We use census data to determine development, affordable housing, senior housing, where we put grocery stores. Grocery stores use census data to determine what type of products they put into their grocery stores. So all of these indirect decisions based on census data also affects our community. So it is critical that we all work together to ensure for a full and accurate count for everyone in Montgomery County. As I mentioned earlier, the federal government allocates $675 billion nationally, and for the state, the impact of that is $16 billion that's allocated in the state of Maryland on a federal, annual basis using census data. So again, the resources are very important. So how are things different this year? So Asha touched on this, but this is the first census that is primarily going to be done online. So the Census Bureau is moving a lot of their resources and operations to push the online response format. Now, what that means to our community is that there is less resources that are invested by the Census Bureau on outreach. And so they're really relying on local jurisdictions and local complete count committees to do that outreach work. Additionally, you all know this, there is a very different political climate this year. So the federal administration's attempt to include the citizenship question, let me be clear, the citizenship question is not going to be included on the census for everyone watching and listening at home. But the damage from that to our communities is everlasting. And additionally, the federal government is using other tactics to scare communities in order to not respond and provide their information to the federal government. And so again, it is because of these reasons that for the first time ever, jurisdictions locally and nationally are allocating significant resources for census outreach because they understand what the financial and political impact is to their communities. So they're really investing heavily on the front end to make sure that they have full and accurate counts in each jurisdiction. So the state of California allocated $100 million, New York $60 million, DC allocated $1.1 million, and the state of Maryland allocated $5 million. Again, this is the first time jurisdictions have allocated dollars for census education and outreach. So I mentioned earlier, the state of Maryland allocated $5 million. They awarded funding through a grants process at the beginning of last year. We applied for and were granted the largest grant in the entire state of Maryland. We were granted $581,700. This also required a one-to-one match of either cash resources or in-kind resources of jurisdictions and nonprofit organizations who applied for these dollars. So for us, we put up $50,000 in cash and the rest through in-kind resources. So in-kind meaning staff time, office space, and other in-kind sources as well. So what we're doing with these funds is we're creating a census fund that's housed at the Community Foundation. This was based off of a model that we saw in New York, and we thought that this was a very good practice and a good model reflecting partnerships between local philanthropy and government that would allow us to leverage additional dollars and also coordinate a county-wide initiative. This funds also allows us to hire a full-time census manager who is sitting next to me today, whom you all have seen in your districts on census outreach, and we'll be talking in a little while. It also allows us to provide funding to several key nonprofit organizations to help us get into these undercounted communities. It also provides for marketing dollars, particularly to the Spanish-speaking community. And it also allows us to hire some contractors for outreach specifically to the Middle Eastern and LGBTQ communities, because that was a gap in our liaison's office. So going on to the timeline, the important thing here is for us to understand that households are going to start to receive invitations from the Census Bureau to respond to the census that has a geocode attached to their household on it, starting on March the 12th. So we need to get ready to respond to residents and questions by March the 12th. Okay, so we're really spending a lot of our investment on education and outreach going up to that date. After March 12th, households should continue to receive invitations over the period of 2 weeks. And what our communication to folks during this time is, A, keep an eye out for the invitation. Once you receive it, please respond to the census by Census Day. Census Day is April the 1st. What we're saying to folks is if once you receive the invitation, if you respond to the census either online, by phone, or by questionnaire, you fill out the questionnaire and complete the answers completely, and you do it by April the 1st, you will not require follow-up from the Census Bureau. So the April 1st date is very important for a lot of our communities who are concerned about the follow-up from the Census Bureau. After that, it's important to understand that the Census Bureau will continue to follow up with folks by postcards. And then the enumeration, the door knocking starts in May. So really a lot of our outreach is happening between now and the end of May. Okay, so now let's talk about hard to count populations, because this is a term that has been a lot of communities are focusing on this term, and this is a Census Bureau focus too. So first, let's just talk about the term. So I don't typically like to use the term hard to count populations. This is a term defined by the Census Bureau that talks about geographic areas and specific communities that they determine to be hard to count. However, as a community organizer, the term I like to use is undercounted communities, because hard to count means that it is my fault that I'm hard to count, but it's not necessarily my fault. You just haven't figured out how to properly count me. So the term I'm going to use when it refers to communities is undercounted, and when we talk about census tracts, I'll use the term hard to count, okay? So like I said, there's two focuses here. One is geographic areas based by census tracts, and Sean's going to talk about that in a second. And second is specific communities. What's important here about the geographic areas and also the communities is that this really drives our overall strategy for outreach and education. So first, let's talk about the undercounted communities. Okay, so for undercounted communities, children under the age of 5 is #1 on the list, and this has been true of almost every census, right? So we are working through early childhood education healthcare providers, and we have a strategy in place for that. For immigrants in the foreign-born community, you know, for Montgomery County, 1 in 3 of our residents are foreign-born. 43% come from a migration background, meaning one or both parents came from a different country of origin. So we have to invest significantly on the outreach to the immigrant and foreign-born community. Limited English proficient individuals. Now, while the average LEP rate in Montgomery County is 15%, it's very high in specific communities. So in the Vietnamese community, it's 62%. In the Spanish-speaking community, it's at 52%. In the Chinese community, it's 54%. So we really have to invest significantly in these communities to ensure for a full and accurate count of these folks. Linguistically isolated individuals, racial and ethnic minorities. This year, this is something we really need to focus on. Households with no computer or inadequate internet access. Now, what does that mean? So one, seniors. Typically, seniors have not been undercounted communities, but we are expecting seniors to be undercounted this time around because of the digital and technology divide. So we're investing heavily in our partnerships and outreach to the senior community. Also for rural areas as well who don't have proper internet access. Again, a lot of on-the-ground outreach to these communities. LGBTQ persons, renters in the county, 40% of households are renters, right? So again, putting a strategy in place to outreach heavily to the renters, and Sean's going to talk about that in a second. Homelessness and low-income folks. So again, this is important to keep in mind because we are thinking about all of these things when we are implementing a county-wide strategy. So let's now talk about the geographic census tracts. And I'm going to turn it over to our fearless census leader, Sean Ellis.
Sorry, I'm a rookie. Thank you, Diane. So let's have a conversation about our approach in the development of our outreach strategy. And since we're taking a regional and geographic approach to the development of these strategies, it was important for us to have an understanding what was predicted to be the outcome in 2020. So we have an idea what the top 10 communities or regions in the county will be to have the lowest response rate. It's important for us to understand that because that's how we develop our strategy. And that's from a total number perspective. Now, if we look specifically at the census tract, and census tracts effectively are just districts, geographic regions used for the purposes of doing the census and collecting the data, right? So what we know is that each census tract can hold up to 2,500 residents. I'm sorry, between 2,500 and 8,000 residents. So it's important to understand what a census tract is made up of, right? So if we look at, for example, a census tract like Long Branch, and fortunately I'm familiar with Long Branch because I was a lifeguard at that pool in high school, so I spent a lot of time in that community.
Not too long ago.
Too long ago. So if we look at Long Branch and who lives and resides in Long Branch, it gives us an idea of what we need to do. And it should shape and has shaped the development of our strategy, not just our strategy, but also our messaging, right? So, for example, there are 5,738 residents living in Long Branch. And for those of you who are not familiar with Long Branch, it's effectively that neighborhood that runs up Piney Branch Road from Flower Avenue across University and effectively ends at New Hampshire Avenue. So that should give you an idea of what community we're looking at. 58.8% of that community is foreign-born. 30% self-identify as being LEP, having limited English proficiency. And 65% of that community self-identify as being Hispanic. So what does that mean? It means for us, when we were doing outreach strategy, we were doing outreach events in the fall and in the winter, it was necessary that we had Spanish-speaking volunteers help us with that outreach. There was no point in me being at a table hosting information or providing information to residents if I couldn't communicate effectively what the messaging was. So we were thankful to have volunteers from the Gilchrist Center to help us with our outreach every Wednesday from 11 o'clock to 4 o'clock for about 7 weeks, do that outreach to that community. Secondly, if you look at that census tract, 65% of that community is renting. That's very, very significant. What that means for us is we have to partner with our nonprofit community or organizations that have existing relationships in that community to do the messaging for us. They serve as our trusted voices to those renters about the importance of the census and why it should matter to them, right? So, for example, if you're familiar with the Long Branch community, CASA has done the door-to-door knocking in that community. They have been in the Flower Avenue apartments. They were at Foxhall Apartments and Flower Branch Apartments, and they also spent time in Northwest Park. And if you're familiar with Northwest Park or that stretch along Piney Branch, you know those are the communities that matter most or are kind of significant in that community. Lastly, you've heard Diane talk about the census and how this time it's going to be different in that it will be online for the first time. So that means that we have to give some thought to who that affects negatively. So if you look at that Long Branch tract, 15.9% of those residents don't have access to a computer, and that includes a smartphone. And that's amazing to think about in this day and age in Montgomery County. 24% of that community also does not have access to internet. So that means that out of necessity, it has to guide our messaging. So not only are we talking about why it's important and that it should matter to them, we also have to talk to them about how they can go about responding to the census in 2020. So it means we share the option to do it over the phone. We share the option about doing it through the traditional paper mail manner. It also means that we share with them the fact that they will have an opportunity to visit libraries and some of our community centers and a few of our faith community members that will serve as safe spaces where they can complete the census and get some assistance. And that's part of the messaging that we've developed and we continue to develop, and especially pushing in those communities that we understand the makeup of. And then Diane will speak to you a little bit more about some of the other strategies we're doing.
Great, thank you, Sean. Sean really has been on the ground with our liaisons and folks. I mean, sometimes I feel like he's cloned because he's been at almost every event. So we're really appreciative for all of his lead work there. So now the next question is, what is Montgomery County doing to ensure for a full and accurate count of everyone? That's what everybody wants to know, right? So first, let's start with the Complete Count Committee, because Asha mentioned these Complete Count Committees are very important in local jurisdictions to the work. So Montgomery County's Complete Count Committee is comprised of a broad section of representatives from all sectors who are charged with developing and implementing an education, awareness, and outreach campaign. Our CCC was established by a joint proclamation by County Executive Mark Albrich and then Council President Nancy Navarro and our CCC Chair back in February of 2019. And we had the kickoff in the East County region, one of the most predicted underaccounted census tracts. What's important to note here is that our CCC is comprised of 147 folks across all of the 5 subcommittees. That is completely unlike every other jurisdiction whose average CCC membership is between 15 and 25. The reason why we use so many folks here is because this really is going to call for an all-hands-on-deck type of approach. And the more people that we have as trusted messengers and to help us guide our work, the better. So out of the larger CCC, we've split the larger committee into 5 regional subcommittees that are chaired by the RSC directors and co-chaired by one of the OCP community liaisons who are here today. And I'll talk more about that in a second. So let's talk about our strategies. So no matter where we are in the county, no matter which community we are working in, these are the core principles of our strategies. So this is important to understand. So again, our focus is truly on hard-to-count census tracts and undercounted communities, but this is our overarching strategy. So one is the key messaging. Again, the census is safe and confidential, it's easy, and it is important. So no matter where you are, whether you're hearing the message from our partners or media or directly from us, that is the message that we're driving home. Our second strategy is to rely heavily on our partners. And our partners are a network of trusted messengers, which I'll talk about all of these strategies in detail in a second. Third is the marketing piece. The marketing piece is important because it's going to help us get into specific census tracts and specific communities. Fourth is this regional approach for outreach. 5 is these outreach events, because the wonderful thing about Montgomery County is we always have a million things happening at any given time. So having a presence at all of these outreach events is critical to our campaign. And the 6th thing I want to note here is that underlying message. The underlying message is if you respond to the census by April the 1st completely and using your household code, you will not require follow-up from the Census Bureau. So although our partners on the ground may be different in each of the communities and census tract, although the message may vary a little bit from community to community, the overall strategies here touch on each of these principles, okay? So let's talk about the messaging. So again, the key message is, it is safe and confidential, easy and important. Households, so the concept of households, everyone counts in the household. That is also a critical part of our messaging. We are using very creative and tailored messaging that targets specific communities that are also linguistically and culturally appropriate. So it's important to meet communities where they are. So not only are we communicating in a language that they can understand, and the language that they speak, we are also tailoring the message about what's at stake based on the community that we're going in. So for example, if I'm walking to the senior community may not necessarily care about school allocation, but I know that they're going to care about senior centers and senior programs like Senior Fit, and also representation. I know that message will resonate with seniors, so that's what I talk about when I go into the senior community. When we go into specific immigrant communities, the representation piece may not be so important, but what is important is the allocation of resources of schools and also to nonprofits that are serving those communities. So again, we tailor our message based on the community that we're going in. And then lastly, the education piece is very important here because a lot of people still don't understand what a census is, have never heard of a census before, what is a census, what the timeline is, and why it's important. So we're really investing a lot on the education piece between now and March the 12th. The other thing that I want to say about messaging here is that we also want to create fun messaging, okay? It is fun to be counted. So we're saying to folks, stand up and be counted. So one of the things that I would love to do is order a bee costume, right? Get it? Be counted. And so our census manager, Sean Ellis, is out in the community wearing a bee costume and resonating with children, right? Like, hey, be counted. Get it? He'll be the buzz of the town. Clearly, I've done this once or twice. So the bee costume, right? A fun thing, and memorable thing that people will always remember, right? Also encouraging people to host census parties. So invite over 10 of your friends, 10 of your neighbors, 10 of your family, and have a census party on or before April the 1st, and encourage everyone to respond to the census at the census party over cheese and crackers. It can be non-dairy cheese and gluten-free crackers, but have the census party, okay? So the message is not all doom and gloom. Please respond to the census. It's really important. It is, hey, it's fun to stand up and be counted to your community. Let's talk about the marketing piece. The marketing piece, again, is really important for us to drive home the message that the census is safe, it's confidential, it's easy, and it's important. Our campaign name is Everyone Counts, because everyone in the county counts and everyone in the household counts. We stay away from terms like residents and citizens, because in specific communities, that could mean people who only have status or citizenship. And that is not the message. The message is everyone counts in the community. We have flyers in 7 languages. Again, it's important to communicate in languages that people, in languages that our communities speak. And the flyers are available on our websites, and all of our partners are using these flyers to distribute when they're out. The media piece is very important here. So part of our state grant contains significant media dollars for outreach in the Spanish-speaking community. So Telemundo is one of our partners. We were at their NBC4 and Telemundo Expo. We've been running PSAs in Spanish on Telemundo. We're also using newspapers, Radio America as well. So the media piece is critical here. You should also be seeing WMATA ads, and that came about through a partnership with COG. Let me mention here that the Council of Governments, we've been working with other jurisdictions in the region through their census work group, and so we're sharing best practices with each other, and we're also partnering on regional strategies here, and this is one of those regional strategies. So what we did was all of the jurisdictions, Prince George's County, Arlington, Fairfax, DC, and us, put in a joint request to WMATA to use their free PSA space between January and May. So we're very appreciative of that relationship with COG and the ability for WMATA to run those ads for us for free. You're going to be seeing in the next couple of weeks ads on the ride-ons. The ride-ons are very important to a lot of our communities. And so you'll start seeing very huge Everyone Counts in Montgomery County ads on the side that will also help us get into very specific census tracts and communities as well. And then lastly, PSAs. The PSAs are important. So the county executive is going to be recording PSAs. We'll be working with the county council to record PSAs as well, also using community leaders, because it's important for us to put out PSAs from people that communities identify with, that are culturally and linguistically appropriate, so that they can identify with the message that is coming out of the PSAs. So really for our marketing strategies, we're using a diverse range of strategies here, because people get their information in different ways. Some people get their information through newsletters, others use newspapers, others still use websites. And so it's important for us to cover that entire range so that people are getting the message no matter what type of communication that they use. Let's talk about this regional approach. So I mentioned earlier we have 5 subcommittees that are chaired by the RSC directors and co-chaired by our community liaisons. This is very important because this helps us design and implement census outreach activities that are specific to those regions and ethnic communities. We're really drilling down and taking a granular approach to our education and outreach here. And so between the RSC directors, the subcommittees, and the ethnic liaisons, we're able to look at what the assets are in each community, what the gaps are, and how we can reach folks in those communities. Our next strategy is the outreach events. So although we started our census events back in February 2019 when the CCC was launched, we really ramped up our campaign in the month of September. So September was perfectly timed for us because September really highlights how multifaceted our county and communities truly are. So September is African Heritage Month. So we were at the Ethiopian Day Festival on September the 1st right on the plaza in downtown Silver Spring. We were at the Pan-African Festival. So between those two events, we reached tens of thousands of folks with our census message. It's also the start of Hispanic Heritage Month. So we were in the Salvadoran Festival at the City of Gaithersburg Fairgrounds. And we reached tens of thousands of folks that day. It is also Welcoming Week during September, and Citizenship Day was September 17th. So the Gilchrist Center really took a lead on those two things and provided outreach to their residents. Future Fest, which was also in the Silver Spring Plaza, that many of you were there that day. Actually, this picture in the bottom corner, first of all, you all know that I hate pictures, so this is a rare sighting of me. But the important thing to note here is that that is the former mayor of our sister city in Ethiopia, who happened to be in town on a sister city visit. And when he came to our census table, he and his team were so excited to see the flyers in Amharic that they took out their smartphones and took pictures of it. So that is me standing with the former mayor and our Amharic flyers. So we reached another 10,000 people that day as well. The Friendship Picnic happened in September, and so our faith liaison provided outreach to the faith community that day. September is also Community Service Month, so that's when we launched our campaign to recruit census ambassadors. And to date, we have trained 124 census ambassadors, not including our Complete Count Committee members, who will be out in the community talking about the importance of the census. So the last strategy here, and it's not last for any other reason except that this is probably one of the most important parts of our strategies. This is really the crux of our campaign. We cannot be successful on our census outreach if it's not for our partners. So partners are trusted messengers, and it is a very comprehensive network of a cross-section of sectors, so government, faith, nonprofit, corporate, community organizations that are working with us to get the word out about the importance of the census. So for nonprofit organizations, I'm not going to go over all of the nonprofit organizations in Montgomery County, but you know that we've been working with that network. The Volunteer Center under our office has a list of 1,100 nonprofits that we're pushing out information to. The faith communities, there will be a full court press at all of the faith communities during Census Awareness Weekend, which is the last weekend in March, which I'll talk about in a little while, but the faith communities are very important to our strategy here. Grocery stores, so ethnic grocery stores and faith communities, I believe, are the most powerful and underutilized outreach tool that we have available to us. So again, during Census Awareness Weekend, full court press, not only at the faith communities, but also at the ethnic grocery stores and grocery stores as well. Corporations and businesses, neighborhood associations, advisory groups, and the BCCs. Our ethnic advisory groups have been all over the census outreach, and so we're grateful for that. And also government agencies. So I'm going to talk about a couple of things that the county is doing here. So one, we've asked all of our agencies to designate census captains. Census captains are liaisons between departments and our office to ensure that employees get counted, and then also their clients get counted as well. They are working with us on doing things such as putting signage in the correct places for employees and their clients as well. What we are doing is granting, Asha mentioned this earlier, we're granting an hour of administrative leave to all county employees to take the census. So regionally, we're doing a take a break, take the census event in partnership with all of our other COG jurisdiction members. And so we're encouraging employees to take a break and take the census on or before April the 1st, and departments will be having those events as well. And the census captains are charged with arranging that. So speaking of government agencies, I'd like to take some time to highlight our key partners here. And first, let's start with one of our favorite government agencies. Yeah. So I'm going to turn this over to our fearless director, who you all know very well, Anita, and her wonderful team.
Good morning, I think, or perhaps this afternoon by now, Council President Katz and council members. So Montgomery County Public Libraries have been supporting the county efforts for the Census Complete Count 2020 since the very beginning. We've been participating since the very first meeting date of February 13th, 2019. We have named our census captain long ago, probably one of the first ones, and our representative has attended nearly all of the meetings and the subcommittee meetings, so we're very aware of the role that we're expected to play and the support that we are to give to this effort in the county. We have focused on several different areas, the first of which was job recruitment. Since February 2019, we have hosted 120 90-minute Census 2020 job information sessions spread across the county at various branches. And we have added or increased the sessions in census tracks where more recruitment is needed. These have been advertised throughout the branches with our digital signage and flyers. And also, the census workers could help applicants fill out their job application right on site in the libraries. We are continuing to schedule these employment sessions up to March 8th, at which time that effort will shift into other areas. We right now are working very closely with our branches to provide space for training enumerators. Enumerators need a 9 to 5 and 8-hour session for training on multiple days, and we're working throughout the branches to provide the space where this can occur. Our third focus will be, of course, information for the community. We have scheduled information tables in our branches, and of course we will be providing census materials in all available languages in the branches, especially focusing on the ones where those communities are likely to come in and avail themselves of our services. We'll have information tables in our branches from February through May in areas of the county where a special emphasis is needed. These would be at Aspen Hill, Gaithersburg, Germantown, Maryland Praisner and Burtonsville, Quince Orchard, Silver Spring, Twin Brook, Wheaton, White Oak. The tables will be in those branches each Tuesday and Saturday from 10 to 4, staffed by census volunteers. We will have a staff member at each of the branch trained as a census captain, and their role will be to be a resource person for the rest of the branch staff in order to make sure that everyone is completely informed of our role in supporting Census 2020 and also able to express to our customers the importance of filling out their census document. We're working with the regional services centers, the volunteer center, in training our volunteers to seat the information tables. And of course, as you know, libraries are always seen as trusted partners. Our reach into the community is extensive with our 20 locations, 21 if you count the Noyes Library, but I don't think we're doing any census outreach there. And we will be probably the main source for public computers where people will be able to come in and fill out their census document. We have 600 public computer terminals across our branches, and we also supplement those with another 200 plus laptops that are available in our branches. We intend to have a direct shortcut to the census website on our desktops, so as soon as someone logs in, they'll be able to hit one shortcut, go right to where they need to. We're considering how we can run a census message as the screensaver on our computers, so when people walk in, they will see that. And we will be providing some repurposed tablets to Diane and her team, so they will be able to use those to take them out into the community to reach people who don't make their way into the libraries. So that's where we are right now with our support of this effort.
Great, thank you so much, Anita. I especially want to thank you not only for designating the census spaces and the uses of the computers, but also for the job recruitment. I mean, I really believe that it's because of the libraries that Montgomery County Census Bureau is at 140% of their target applicants. here in Montgomery County because of all of the work the libraries have done on the job recruitment. So thank you for that. So next is a lady who really needs no introduction, also one of my favorite directors in the county, because let me just shout out that she's a former OCP liaison, so OCP family forever. So I'm now going to turn this over to Carla at Montgomery College.
Good afternoon. My colleague Nick Shishko was not able to stay, but this is a partnership. We have our own complete count committee at Montgomery College. Student Life and Community Engagement are co-chairing that. I have a few slides. Some of the things that we're doing at Montgomery College, we have 55,000 students, majority immigrant, I think more countries represented than MCPS. So we have fertile ground and a lot of work to do to make sure that our own students and their families are counted. So we have a census website with resources for faculty. We have all of our events, our information is there. The county's translated census are available, the flyers are available there. Next slide. We are also doing open houses at the libraries. We have 3 libraries, one at each campus, and we have designated April 1st in the evening and Saturday, April 4th, 10 to 2, really encouraging our students to come or bring their families to complete the census at the time with our computer labs at the libraries. Also our welcome centers. We have a welcome center for students on every campus. They will also have the census link or icon on their computers during business hours 8 to 5 for the month of April. Students will be able to come again and complete the census and get help from the Welcome Center staff if needed. MCTV is doing a lot of work for us with promotion. We are doing Facebook Live events starting the first week of March. As you can see there, English, Spanish, Amharic, French, and Vietnamese. And the idea is to have students and staff kind of interviewing each other, so you have different backgrounds, different ages, asking some relevant, frequently asked questions about the census. And that's Facebook Live, but then we can use clips from those recordings to promote the census afterwards. We applied for a community foundation grant, which Diane mentioned, and we did get some funding. So we have 18 census ambassadors who are students, and they are getting some stipend to promote the census. They have started. They're doing the questionnaire that you maybe have seen some other nonprofits do. I know Identity has done it. They're already on campus surveying their peers about how much knowledge they need about the census and if they're going to need help. They're tabling at the different campuses, and they're also starting a social media campaign, which we know is going to be very effective with our young population. Montgomery College, the bread and butter is teaching and students. So our faculty have been offered training, and the resources, lesson plans are available on our website so that they can download something from different fields and integrate it into their syllabus. We are planning census festivals, I guess to capture those that haven't gotten on board by April 1st, so in mid-April. Again, just make some noise, DJs, photo booths, attract attention, so people can, if they haven't heard about it by then, come and complete the census with us at our census festivals. What else did I want to mention? I think that pretty much sums up what we are doing. Great to be here today and hear some of the other things that partners are doing, because it gives us also some ideas to continue to do at the college.
Great. Thank you so much, Carla and fellow OCP sister, for all of your work. I also next would like to introduce another lady who needs no introduction, who is here wearing 2 hats, one with the University of Maryland, but here today to talk about the work of the Maryland Latino Census Coalition, which we are a member of. Gloria.
Buenas tardes. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Gloria Aparicio Blackwell. I'm the Director of the Office of Community Engagement at the University of Maryland. Andrew, go Terps. The good things about what we're doing in terms of, as we heard about all the undercounted population, and as you know where the University of Maryland is located, the majority of our neighboring communities have a heavily population of immigrant community. More importantly, is going to be the Latino community. So with that, we decided what a great opportunity for us of a population at the university is around 50,000 people any given day, that we can get engaged to address this issue, and starting with the college students. As you know, college students, they usually will not complete those forms because they say, well, mom and dad will take care of it, or we live in some places not here, but the reality is they are here. So we are trying to change that mindset. So 49% were counted in 2010. So Prince George's County, in this case, lost $363 million because of the undercounted populations. So what we have decided, the next population hard to count was the Latino community that they came to present to us, the Census, the U.S. Census Bureau representative. So we decided to say, well, what else could we do? So we have, I happen to know some great community leaders that happen to be from that community. And also I met with Danielle Jones, who also is another U.S. Census representative partnership. And we came together and put a list of great people, including Nancy Navarro, also Carla Silvestre, and so many of you that are here today, that we are coming together to address this. Why? We don't have to reinvent the wheels. We have to come together to see what could we do about it. So we have worked with Identity. They're going out to be kind of rallying the community. It is about trust. Right now, trust. That community is telling us we're not going to complete this form. They're going to come to get us. The government is going to come here to get us. We have to confront that. We have to tell them there is a system in place where your information is going to be protected. But here's the other caveat of this information. You want better school. You want better transportation. You want better hospitals, police officers that are protecting you. This money will help you with this. So that is the message that we are going to take out, and that we are doing it right now. And the coalition that is composed from people from Frederick, because those communities come here too, they move around. So from Frederick, from Baltimore was heavily undercounted. So as a resident of Montgomery County, as a resident of the state of Maryland, we have to all work together in the different jurisdictions. Some of the examples that you're providing here about what events and programming, they are replicating in the other jurisdictions. So as much as we get the people that are trusted in the community, getting them in the front page of every newspaper that we can see, El Pregonero, the faith-based community like Catholic Charities, they are going out to to give this information out. What I'm telling the community right now, there are the scammers out there. They are saying that we have this form and you need to give us your social security number and you have to give us your bank account. Please, that information is not what is going to be in that form. The other challenge that we have with the immigrant community is about race. As you know, we are all a mixture. I included myself. I just did the 23andMe, and I'm a rainbow. I have from all over the map. So in my case, when they ask about what race are you, I will say I'm mestiza. I'm mixed. I'm a mixed race. So I think people need to understand, not to feel afraid of completing that form. You're not just a black and white color. So we have to be coming and let them know what the questions and what kind of answers you might be thinking that the census will be able to accept too. So I think it is about for us, for this coalition, is to get all the information out and to get together. We're having a meeting in March 11 in Baltimore. Everyone comes. 20 to 50 community leaders are coming because they want to see what is working and what is not working too. So thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for your efforts and your support. President Law at the University of Maryland is excited about, I get my boss excited about, then we can do the work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gloria. Like I said, she needs no introduction, but also she's a great example of how community advocates and community leaders who are on the ground that are not tied to government can really rally communities in a way that we as government agencies can't, because there are some things that we can and we cannot say, and as community advocates and leaders, they can really rally communities around being counted and ensuring that everyone is counted and ensuring that communities own the census count, right? It's not us telling the communities they need to respond. It's community advocates saying we need to own the census count. So thank you, Gloria, and to our partners. So really, I would like to take a moment to recognize all of our partners who are, many of them are not in this room today. We cannot do this work without you, and we cannot stress enough how important these partnerships are to our communities. I'd like to recognize some folks who are in the crowd. MCPS and planning were here earlier. I don't think, oh yes, good to see you, thank you. And also our elected officials have been all over the census. I'd like to recognize Nina, who is here from Jamie Raskin's office. And I'd also like to thank Delegate Janelle Wilkins, who is our CCC state representative, who's been a wonderful advocate for us on the state level. I'd also like to thank all of the liaisons, the OCP staff, the RSC directors, Sean, and all of the census ambassadors and CCC members for all of their work as well. So the question now is, so what's next? So the message here that we hope that you push out to your folks is that households need to be ready to look out for invitations to arrive in their households by March the 12th. Once they receive those invitations, they should respond to the census online by April the 1st. So we are having Census Awareness Weekend, perfectly timed, March 27th through the 29th. This is right after all households should have received their census invitations and right before the April 1st census date. So that weekend, that Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, you will see census stuff everywhere. At the faith communities, we're doing Census Sabbath weekend. All of our nonprofit partners are going to be pushing out information and all of their events that weekend. The libraries, rec community centers will have a presence there. The grocery stores and ethnic grocery stores, all of our census ambassadors will be dispatched at particularly grocery stores, ethnic grocery stores, small businesses, libraries, rec, and community centers. And we're going to have 5 regional census events and rallies. Part of our other messaging is how to get involved to folks. So if you're out in the community and there's a census partner that you come across or somebody who wants to be involved with the census, please encourage them to go to our website to sign up to be a partner and or a census ambassador. And our website is montgomerycountymd.gov/census. Flyers are on there, event calendars, outreach materials, and any toolkits are all available on our website. So again, the key message that I want everyone to walk away with, because we threw out a lot of information today, is that the 2020 census is safe and confidential, it's easy and important, and everyone in Montgomery County counts. Thank you very much for having us here.
Thank you. Councilmember Rice.
I'm going to be very brief because I know that the time is late, but just wanted to put in a request that we really focus on our young people. As I sit next to our council member for a day, our young people are becoming greater advocates now than they ever have been before. Their voice is incredibly strong. However, the latest Pew data came out and said that only 1 in 5, especially those who make under $30,000 and especially those who are African American, are going to participate in the census. That's your 80-20% that you're talking about right there, and it's of a population that we know continuously is always undercounted when it comes to the census. And so when it's coming to partnering with MCPS, working with Minority Scholars Program and others who are leaders in the community, who are really able to get out and make sure that their voice is heard and that they rally around. It's thinking about those innovative ways. We always go to the CASAs and the identities and the NAACP, but the reality is that they have a finite group and set of folks. We've got to start breaking those barriers and getting outside of the box. And so I just encourage you to start thinking about those kinds of things. Was a suggestion that we came up with together. So thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. President, and Ms. Fu, thank you so much, and all the partners for this briefing. Thank you, Gloria. One of the things I wanted to make sure when we did launch this, when I was council president, was that we would receive periodic updates so that we can work together. The idea is to amplify this work, and so much has been done. I'm so appreciative of everything that has been done thus far, and I hope that maybe in writing we can continue to get some updates just so that we individually as well as collectively can help and amplify the work that you're already doing. That would be super important. So just a number of just thoughts. I do believe that we already have best practices, and we already have a framework in terms of strategies to do outreach to communities that are undercounted, because that's what we do on a daily basis through the work of the Office of Community Partnerships with the Regional Services Director, with everything that we do. I mean, so I think that part we should have sort of like already set. So the idea is, how are we going to push that out? And Councilmember Rice's point was so important, because our young people have to be a part of this, especially when it comes to social media and spreading the word. So that I think is going to be super important. I was wondering, in terms of how are you distributing the funds that you've received with regards to the Office of Community Partnership liaisons? Is each liaison, do they have a budget so that they can go forth into their communities, or is that something that is happening just within your overall budget for your office?
So that's happening overall with our overall strategy. So the liaisons don't have a budget per se, but we're designating funds to go to nonprofit organizations that are working with communities. The regional service center directors are going to get funds to do these events. So it's not the liaisons that hold the budget, but it's really the community and our partners who have that budget.
Okay, so I mean, I think if there could be some way that when the liaisons are working, they have their advisory committees, and those are people that are putting on a lot of time, plus there are people that are very well known in the community. It would be nice for them to have some kind of resources, however that's managed, et cetera. That would be, I think, really useful. Also, I think it's going to be really critical for us to use our 311 system, but use it appropriately, because we did a test run this morning, and I feel like the information they're putting out or they're sharing is not necessarily accurate. So we need to do that with the Spanish language assistance. When they forward you to the website's in English, so we need to kind of take care of that ASAP. That's a really great way to automatically refer people quickly to 311. It's easy, people can remember that, that's important. Things like utility bills, I know other jurisdictions are doing that, so it'd be really cool for us to do these kind of things. Package messages that maybe we can also have access to on the council, so really cool little blurbs with infographic or a cool picture or something that we can just push that out and help amplify as well. I think might be a really great way to amplify whatever you were talking about. And then lastly, I really thought the idea of pop-ups was really cool with the tablets. So especially those undercounted areas that you were talking about. So maybe you don't go to a mega mart just to be at the mega mart giving a flyer, but maybe you're there with the tablets and you kind of host all these really cool, I don't know, with piñatas or whatever, but really cool parties where people can see that. But I just want to emphasize, when I participated in the CASA event and there was door knocking, we received immediate feedback from some of the volunteers that people were just not opening the doors, or if they open the door, just close it right away. And so, I mean, I have to emphasize, we got to do a lot of work to just let the community know, hey, if you're wearing the Census button or whatever, please talk to these folks. But there's so much fear out there. That even with an organization like CASA wearing the T-shirts, people were already saying, no, I don't want to be a part of this, right? So anyway, just some of those things, and just really appreciative of the work. It's a lot, but I think it's necessary, and it's worth every single piece of effort, because this will determine so many things for us that we just can't let it slide easily. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Albornoz.
Incredible presentation. This is like a dream team, looking at the group and the committee. Just a couple of thoughts. One, our faith-based community is, and I know they're part of the committee, but this is one of the ways that I think we're going to be able to counter some of the messaging, particularly in our immigrant communities, and we really need to triple, quadruple, quintuple down on that. And so to the degree to which I or anybody who's out there, I'd be willing to go out to any service anywhere to speak to congruents in Spanish about the importance of this, why it's relevant, and if we can develop a strategy from a grassroots standpoint to reach out to those folks, I think would be really helpful. So Reverend Caseman, I will follow up with you on that thought. And then I can't underscore enough the social media strategy. There needs to be a point person for that. I was blown away during my campaign this last year about how effective and inexpensive Facebook ads and some of the social media strategies that you can use that can hyper-target residents and individuals. And I was really surprised by how many people were on social media that I wasn't expecting to be. So whoever the point person is there on that, there needs to be somebody who's designated. And then finally, on the fun aspect of this, I've been kicking around this. I've been kicking around this idea of like an ice bucket challenge of some sort. You know, some social media, I don't know what it looks like. I was thinking about biting a jalapeno or something. But something that is fun and engaging, that gets people just talking about this in a fun and creative way to eliminate some of the stigma. So I'm going to work on that a little bit more. But we should all be thinking about stuff like this right now. A dance-off, bam, that would be huge. So those are a lot of things that we need to start thinking about. But I appreciate all the effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Giwando.
Thank you, Council President. I just wanted to thank everyone for the presentation and all your work, both at the dais and behind. I know, and many others that aren't here. Big shout out to our libraries, as Lead for Libraries. I say all the time, preaching the gospel of all the great work that we do and how we're on the front lines. And so really excited to hear about the tablets. Some of these things I didn't even know you were doing. So and they're ongoing. I'm sure you'll come up with other ways to make sure people are counted. And I, too, want to echo my colleagues that we need to be more personally engaged. You know, I'm in the middle of my library tour. We need to, Anita, from here on out, let's make this a part at the up front tonight. We have one tonight. We have one tonight at Twin Brook. So I'm going to talk about the census, and if there can be, I know we're going to shoot videos, but if you can fold us all into our outreach, you know, with talking points and materials. We need to just, everywhere we go, this is, you know, game time right now, and so we look forward to working with you to make that more robust, because we're talking to a lot of people a lot of the time, and so glad this briefing is very timely. So thank you to our census partners nationally and to everyone and all the other agencies. Thank you.
And Councilmember Rice.
Just very quickly, I just heard TikTok video.
Yeah.
That's the way to go.
Yeah.
I heard it from...
So who wants to do that in the hot chip challenge first? Can we get that on record? Okay, all right.
We can do it all.
First off, thank you very, very much. We do appreciate the presentation. We know that there's a lot of work that you have done, and there's a lot of work that you will be doing, and we want to be your partner as well to coordinate everything. We're going to close out this part of our meeting, but I do want to remind everyone that we will be back here at 1:30 for our public hearing. That will be followed by the interview with the County Executive's appointee as Director of Department of Finance, Michael Covio. That will be followed by a proposed closed session. Then, after that, the council, there's a couple of committees. There's a joint committee meeting of HHS and Public Safety at 2:30, allegedly at 2:30, and the Fed committee is also at the same time. We don't know exactly when it will start, but it will start directly after the closed session. Thank you for being with us. We will be back at 1:30.
Picture.